comments by visiting cspan.org and typing Trump in the search bar. The Senate Homeland Security Committee held a hearing on immigration laws and heard testimony from Border Patrol and immigration enforcement officials. Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson chairs this 2.5-hour hearing.
Good morning. This hearing will come to order. I want to welcome all our witnesses. Thank you for your thoughtful testimony. As I said last week, I really encourage all the committee members, if you haven't had a chance, please read the testimony. I think these witnesses, again, have done a very good job of laying out the reality of the crisis that we face on the border. Let's quick, I'm asked that my written statement be entered in the record. Let's quick put up the chart that really describes this. We don't have final numbers for the final week in March. But again, I'm not going to go through the full explanation of this, but only to point out, in less than 6 months, we have apprehended more than 240,000 either unaccompanied children or people coming to this country as family units, individuals who, according to testimony last week, are part of a process, it's almost a well-oiled machine of the human traffickers, the transnational criminal organizations, individuals that are moving people from Central America into this country, completely exploiting our laws. But 240,000 people in less than 6 months, and that compares to 120,000 in 2014, the year that President Obama correctly labeled that a humanitarian crisis. So again, in less than half a year, we're double the level of 2014. We're going to be hearing from people in Customs Border Protection, the folks that are trying to grapple with this growing crisis, how it's completely overwhelmed our system. But again, this is going to be a very full hearing. We have representatives from the agencies that are grappling with this crisis. I want to thank you, first of all, for your service to this country, for trying to deal with it. But this is up to Congress. We have laws on the books and court decisions that need to be addressed through congressional action, through passing laws. From my standpoint, the goal of this is to reduce, if not stop, the flow of this illegal immigration. That's got to be the goal of our policy, and recognizing, I tried to make this point in the last hearing as well, we have a short-term, it's a long-term problem, but we have a short-term crisis. We have to address this with short-term measures. I'm all for developing and sending dollars and trying to help those nations whose public institutions have been destroyed by our insatiable demand for drugs in Central America. But that's not going to solve this problem anytime soon. We have to enact the laws so we can address this problem right now. We can't afford to wait any longer. One other chart I want to quick put up here. I had my staff take a look at this. You know, if we're going to fix this, and Dr. Saley last week talked about having a more rapid adjudication process of that initial determination of an asylum claim. And the reason that's important is if we don't detain individuals, we only are able to remove about 7%. If we detain people and they have an invalid asylum claim, we can remove about 77%. And so we have to be able to have an adjudication process in a time period where we have the detention facilities so we can actually remove them. Otherwise, it's kind of a moot point. We have to take a look at that initial hurdle in terms of credible fear or a more likelihood that their asylum claim would be viewed as valid. 85% of asylum claims are denied. So we have to come to that determination a lot quicker. This chart right here shows what type of facilities we'd need based on the number of people coming to this country illegally on a monthly basis versus the number of days to adjudicate that initial claim. And it's pretty shocking. Right now, we had about 100,000 individuals is what the estimate is for March. About 100,000 people coming to this country illegally. If it takes 45 days, right now it's taking about 40 days, I think, to get that initial determination, we're looking at needing detention facilities, somewhere about 125,000 beds is what this chart would show you, because we're right between 150, 110, and 100,000 beds, 45 to 30-day adjudication process. 125,000 beds. We got about 50. So this chart also shows you the solution. Reduce the flow, reduce the number of days to adjudication, and then we'll have plenty of detention facilities. And, you know, Senator Hassan's been talking about this. I don't want to detain people. It costs a lot of money. What I want to do is I want to come to a very rapid conclusion, a rapid determination. Is this a valid asylum claim or an invalid one? If it's an invalid asylum claim, we have to remove those individuals back to their home country. We know this works. Secretary Chertoff in 2005, with a surge of Brazilians, about 31,000 that year came in from Mexico into our southern border, he realized that was a problem. So he initiated a process of rapid removal, and the next year is 1,400. So we know that works. That's what we need to do, but we have to pass the laws to do it. So again, I won't go on any further, but I'm just asking this committee, I will be proposing legislation, hopefully working with Senator Peters and others on a bipartisan basis to fix this problem. We have to address it, and it's a short-term, it's a short-term situation that we've got to deal with this. We can't wait for the long-term fixes. With that, Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing today, and to all of our witnesses, thank you for being here today. You know, last Thursday's hearing provided information about the scope and the scale of the challenges that we're now facing on our southern border. Important historical context was provided, and a chance to examine how we can better work with the governments of Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. During my opening statement, just 5 days ago, in the hearing that we had last week, I said that securing our borders will take cooperation and credibility from this administration, and not chaos and not confusion. Unfortunately, in the days since, just the 5 days, we have seen nothing but more chaos out of the administration. Since this first southern border hearing concluded, we've seen the administration withdraw the nominee to be the Director of U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, a nominee who had a hearing before this committee last year and was approved during the committee meeting last month. We have seen the announcement of Homeland Security Secretary Nielsen's resignation. We have seen the President fire Secret Service Director Adolph Alice for unknown reasons, creating another senior vacancy at the Department of Homeland Security. And we have seen reports that the White House is potentially preparing to fire the Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. It is, in a word, chaos. The problems we face at our southern border will not be fixed with high-profile firings or tweets or press conferences. It's going to take leadership. And as I said last week, it's going to take cooperation and credibility. By the end of the week, the Department of Homeland Security will have no secretary, no deputy secretary, no chief financial officer, nobody leading multiple major bureaus, and therefore virtually no accountability to the American people. We are looking at an absence of leadership at the top of the third largest department in our federal government, a department charged with preventing terrorism, securing our borders, enforcing our immigration laws, safeguarding cyberspace, and ensuring resilience to disasters. Fortunately, the men and women of DHS and its component agencies, career public servants, continue to show up to work, and they continue to do their best across the country in the midst of a very difficult situation on our southern border. Last week, we heard that it's not just the number, but the composition of the migrant groups that is straining our infrastructure. Specifically, the influx of families and children seeking asylum from dangerous conditions in the Northern Triangle countries has created an unprecedented challenge for our frontline personnel. There are no easy answers or quick fixes here, but we know that the trauma of detaining young children and separating them from their parents puts these children at a risk of irreparable harm. I have asked multiple officials from this administration who have testified before this committee. I've asked, how long is too long to detain a child? I have yet to receive a real answer. We must do better. We need to reduce the backlogs in processing asylum claims. Screening interviews are being delayed. The average wait to appear before an immigration court is now over 2 years. And the backlog is quickly approaching 1 million cases. This is simply unacceptable. We need to address root causes of mass migration, take on the violence and impunity that regions across the Northern Triangle experience, and disrupt the transnational criminal organizations that cash in on drug trafficking and human smuggling. This will take careful cooperation with regional governments, law enforcement, and civil society, not cutting off existing funding to nonprofit organizations operating in the Northern Triangle. We need Mexico to do more to address the flow of migrants across their southern border, but it'll take sustained cooperation and American leadership, not baseless threats and disengagement. Finally, we need to secure our southern border, and I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about what is working and what is not. I look forward to hearing how we can replicate your successes and address your challenges, and I look forward to discussing how we can improve the data that Congress and federal agencies rely on to make thoughtful decisions. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Senator Peters. Again, what it will take is legislation. And we need to act now to address this situation now. We can't rely on long-term fixes to address this situation now. So again, that's why I want to work with you. That's why we're holding these hearings, is to determine what we need to do now to fix this. So it does require legislation. It is the tradition of this committee to swear in witnesses, so if you all stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated. Our first witness is Mr. Rudolfo Karish. Mr. Karish is the Chief Patrol Agent for the U.S. Border Patrol's Rio Grande Valley Sector and Commander of the Joint Task Force West South Texas Corridor. He previously served as the Chief Patrol Agent of the Tucson and Del Rio sectors. He also previously served as CBP Attaché to Mexico. Mr. Karish.
Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Peters, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the chance to appear before you today. I am proud to have served as a Border Patrol agent for more than 30 years, currently as the Chief Patrol Agent in the Rio Grande Valley Sector, or RGV, and also have served as the Chief Patrol Agent of the Tucson Sector. In my 30 years as an agent, I have never witnessed the conditions we are currently facing on the southwest border. This is not a manufactured crisis created by those of us who live and work in the border area. Border Patrol continues to apprehend record numbers of people who purposely violate U.S. immigration laws. We are taken advantage of by gaps in our legal framework, and that undermine the rule of law. Criminal organizations along the border capitalize on these issues and make tremendous profits at the expense of both migrants and the American people. RGV is responsible for securing 277 miles of border. This is a small fraction of the United States, but it accounts for 38% of all illegal immigration along the entire southwest border. To put things into perspective, last year agents in RGV made 162,000 apprehensions. We're already at 147,000. At this pace, in my sector alone, we will have more than 260,000 apprehensions by the end of the fiscal year. On average, we apprehend more than 1,000 people illegally crossing the border every day. That's roughly the capacity of 17 commercial buses. Last week, agents in my sector apprehended 1,766 people in a single 24-hour period. We expect these numbers to continue to climb as we enter the summer months, which will undoubtedly place both migrants and our Border Patrol agents at significant risk. Rescue missions will increase as a result, drawing additional personnel from our frontline law enforcement mission. Much media attention has focused on caravans from Central America, but the fact is that RGV is receiving caravan-equivalent numbers of migrants every 7 days. The majority of people we are apprehending are family units and unaccompanied children from the Northern Triangle countries of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. Many are extremely vulnerable. Consequently, 30 to 40% of my daily workforce is doing humanitarian work at any given point in time. This includes processing, care and feeding, hospital watch, and transportation. It also means that at any given point in time, 30 to 40% of my workforce is not available to secure the border. An agent who's taken a migrant to a hospital is not available to interdict narcotics, nor are we able to respond to other smuggling events or border intrusions when we encounter and apprehend large groups of people. The bad guys know this. They know our resources are stretched thin in addressing the humanitarian issue, which undermines our border security operations. They direct the movement of large groups into certain border areas as a diversion to facilitate the smuggling of drugs. This is an issue of both national security and officer safety. In addition to the large groups of families and children from Central America, other illegal aliens from all over the world are caught trying to evade arrest. In my sector alone, we have encountered people from 50 different countries. That includes Bangladesh, China, Turkey, Egypt, Romania, to name a few. People are traveling across hemispheres to attempt to legally enter the U.S. using the same pathways as the Central Americans. We also encounter known gang members from some of the most violent gangs on earth, including MS-13 and 18th Street. Some of these gang members are fraudulently posing as part of these migrant families. I'd like to share with you a translation of a text message that we intercepted from an MS-13 gang member who is part of one of these fraudulent family units. He wrote, "You should see the amount of Hondurans that are traveling with a child. And they pay less to the smugglers in order to be delivered to the Border Patrol. And it's a direct trip. They have them a few days with Border Patrol, and afterwards they are released." There are a lot of people with that law. That is the easiest way right now. Entire families are coming. So make no mistake about it, the word is getting out. If you are part of a family, if you bring a child, you will be released. Just last Friday, our agents apprehended an adult Honduran male with a one-year-old child. After questioning the man admitted the child was not, in fact, his. Something has to change. The levels of mass migration we're seeing profoundly impacts our ability to control the border and stop dangerous people and drugs from entering the country. I implore Congress to consider legislative action that restores integrity to our immigration system. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Karish. And again, thank you for your service. Our next witness is Mr. Randy Howe. Mr. Howe is the Executive Director of Operations for U.S. Customs and Border Protection. In this role, he oversees 30 field offices and 328 ports of entry. Mr. Howe.
Good morning, Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Peters, and distinguished members of the committee. It's an honor to appear before you today on behalf of CBP's Office of Field Operations. U.S. Customs and Border Protection has 4 priority missions: national security, counter-narcotics, economic security, and the facilitation of lawful trade and travel. We operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to accomplish those missions. Our job is to move people and cargo through our ports of entry while inspecting all of those for possible hazards and stopping threats at the border. Our nation's economy and our national security relies on our vigilance. It is an immense task, even in the best circumstances. Our officers report to duty never knowing what challenges they will face or if their lives will be threatened. Factors like port volume, resource constraints, and enforcement activities make every day unpredictable. In recent months, however, we've seen an unprecedented, unsustainable trend in our daily operations. Inadmissible migrants, sometimes traveling in large groups, are arriving at our ports of entry without proper documentation. The majority are family units, unaccompanied children, and nearly all of them seeking asylum. I'd like to give you a snapshot of the daily operations at one of our ports of entry. Just this past Saturday in Nogales, Arizona, our officers made 5 separate trips transporting migrants to medical facilities, including 1 trip transporting a family of 5. 4 unaccompanied alien children from Honduras arrived at our Deconcini pedestrian port of entry, all claimed asylum. A family from Cuba entering the country by commercial bus then claimed asylum. A single vehicle inspection yielded 70 packages of methamphetamine, weighing more than 72 pounds. And a male imposter presenting someone else's documents was encountered as a pedestrian and taken in for processing. Among all this activity, our officers are regularly transporting migrants to coordinating centers or into ICE custody, or accepting detainees from other ports of entry to alleviate overcrowding. This is in addition to our work to process the people and cargo with a legitimate need to pass through our ports of entry every day. While the current migration flows have taxed our officers at the ports of entry, the levels of migration between the ports is catastrophic. To support our colleagues in the U.S. Border Patrol, the Office of Field Operations has redirected 545 frontline officers from our southwest border ports of entry to help process and care for the record number of migrants. But these actions are not without consequences. Travelers and shippers are experiencing increased wait times as they approach our southwest border ports of entry. This is true across all modes of travel: pedestrian, personal vehicles, and commercial trucks. In El Paso, Texas, just yesterday, passenger vehicle wait times at the Bridge of the Americas were as long as 160 minutes. The peak time last year, same day, was 45 minutes. The situation is even more dire in our cargo processing. Last year, wait times for cargo processing in El Paso were less than 15 minutes. Yesterday, wait times were as long as 250 minutes. That's about 4 hours. At the end of the day, 63 trucks were not processed. This is the direct result of the 545 CBP officers being reassigned to assist the Border Patrol with the care and custody of the surging numbers of migrants. I cannot overstate the importance of these operations. The border security and humanitarian crisis at the southwest border has ripple effects that impact the entire nation. Suspended services negatively affect the trade community, the supply chain, businesses that rely on these products, and ultimately the consumer. Despite the challenges we face, our officers continue to process migrants claiming asylum, facilitate legitimate trade and travel, and interdict narcotics from entering the United States. I appreciate the support Congress has offered to our men and women of the front lines, and I ask that you consider legislative action that will address this crisis. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Howe. Our next witness is Mr. Timothy Tubbs. Mr. Tubbs is the Deputy Special Agent in charge for the Homeland Security Investigations Laredo, Texas office, which includes McAllen and Brownsville, Texas. He previously served as the ICE attaché to Mexico. Mr. Tubbs.
Good morning, Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Peters, and distinguished members of the committee. I want to thank you for the opportunity today to be here to discuss U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, and our frontline perspective on the sophisticated smuggling threats that we face on the southwest border, the approaches that lead up to the border, and some of what we do to address transnational criminal organizations, or TCOs, that threaten border security, homeland security, and public safety by seeking to bring illicit goods, people, and proceeds into the United States. HSI special agents use their vast authority to investigate cross-border criminal activity and work in close collaboration with U.S. Customs and Border Protection, our Office of Field Operations, United States Border Patrol, as well as the Drug Enforcement Administration. We work in a unified effort with domestic and international law enforcement partners to combat that illicit activity. Today, I will highlight how HSI, since our inception, has targeted, investigated, disrupted, dismantled, and brought to justice transnational criminal organizations who threaten our border security, our homeland security, and our public safety through their cross-border illicit activity. HSI is grateful to you for the continued congressional support that enables us to successfully execute and complete our complex investigative mission both at home and abroad, working with our domestic and international partners. HSI Laredo. So HSI Laredo is my current area of responsibility. It's one of the most active areas of responsibility for my agency. It covers approximately 300 miles of border, of U.S.-Mexico border, and it covers what is the Mexican state of Tamaulipas with the United States border. If you look at the HSI special agents that work in that area, they are on the true forefront of what is border security, and they truly live every single day what is border security for we as the United States government and the United States of America. Mexico is the front doorstep for transnational criminal organizations to bring in illicit goods and people to the United States. Mexico is a major source country for the transit and production of illicit drugs destined for the United States, including marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamines, heroin, and most recently fentanyl. As a result of Mexico's dominant role both as a source and transit point for illicit drugs destined for the United States, it's also a primary destination for illicit proceeds that the cartel earns through their distribution networks in the United States. Mexico cartels use a variety of techniques to repatriate illicit funds from bulk cash smuggling to sophisticated trade-based money laundering schemes. Many of these more complex schemes use third-party money launderers. As such, HSI has established an abundance of investigative tools in our arsenal to disrupt and dismantle cartel money laundering operations. Also, HSI and the Department of Justice, the Criminal Division, we've established the Extraterritorial Criminal Travel Strike Force Program, which addresses U.S. security risks posed by TCOs that smuggle special interest aliens. And these special interest aliens could potentially cause a threat to U.S. national security and public safety. This ECT program is designated to disrupt and dismantle these human smuggling organizations worldwide through our aggressive investigations and criminal prosecutions, both domestically and extraterritorially. HSI works very close with our international partners to disrupt and dismantle TCOs. HSI has 68 offices in 51 countries, and we're positioned to utilize our established relationships with those host country law enforcement to include the engagement in what we call transnational criminal investigative units, or TCIUs. These TCIUs are composed of DHS-trained host country officials who have the authority to investigate and enforce violations of laws in their respective countries. The TCIUs enable both ICE and the host country to conduct joint criminal investigations, joint prosecutions, while meeting the common mission of both the host country and ICE, also respecting the sovereignty of the host country and cultivating that international relationship. These efforts, often thousands of miles away from our U.S. border in countries like the Dominican Republic and Mexico, both of which I've had the opportunity to serve, essentially act as an outer layer of security for our southwest border. Mexico, specifically, again, where I've served for 3.5 years before going to Laredo, has proven to be an outstanding partner in the fight against TCOs, taking down cartel leadership, as well as taking down the leadership of these organizations that smuggle special interest aliens, and ultimately working with us cooperatively in efforts to dismantle those organizations. The ICE attaché in Mexico is our largest ICE presence outside the United States, and there we have an established TCIU with the government of Mexico. Through our attaché, we work well with the government of Mexico in combating TCOs and combating the transnational drug smuggling, weapons smuggling, human smuggling, and money laundering. The spirit of cooperation and joint efforts between DHS components and our counterparts in Mexico is unprecedented. HSI will continue to work with our law enforcement partners. We will continue to work with them both domestically and foreign to improve our efficiency and effectiveness of information sharing, operational coordination to combat TCOs and their illicit border activity, which ultimately threatens our border security, our national security, and our public safety. I want to thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to answering any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tubbs. Our next witness is Commander Jonathan White. Commander White serves as the U.S. Public Health Service Commissioned Corps, or in the U.S. Public Health Service Commission Corps. He is the Health and Human Services Senior Advisor in the Office of Emergency Management and Medical Operations. He previously served as the Deputy Director of Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement. Commander White.
Good morning, Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Peters, and members of the committee. It's my honor to appear today before you on behalf of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. As the chairman noted, my name is Jonathan White. I'm a career officer in the U.S. Public Health Service Commission Corps. I'm also a clinical social worker and an emergency manager, and most recently I have been detailed as HHS's operational lead in the effort to reunify children who were separated from their parents at the southwest border. I want to talk to you about the Unaccompanied Alien Children Program in the Office of Refugee Resettlement in HHS. ORR is responsible for the care and the temporary custody of unaccompanied children referred to ORR by other federal agencies. And as a reminder, ORR does not apprehend migrants at the border or enforce the immigration laws, and HHS is not a law enforcement agency. As defined by the Homeland Security Act, if a child under the age of 18 with no lawful immigration status is apprehended by another federal agency and there's no parent or legal guardian with the child or available in the United States to provide care and custody of the child, that child is considered, the legal term is an unaccompanied alien child, and is transferred to ORR for care and custody. ORR operates shelters nationwide that provide housing, nutrition, routine medical care, mental health services, educational services, and recreational activities. And these provide an environment that has parity with facilities in the child welfare systems that house children here domestically. The facilities are operated by nonprofit grantees who are licensed to provide care to children by state licensing authorities, the same that would regulate such facilities housing domestic children. The one exception is ORR's temporary hard-sided influx care facility on the former U.S. Job Corps site in Homestead, Florida, which is not required to obtain state licensure because it's located on federally owned property. However, children at that location generally receive the same level of care and services as children who are in a state licensed facility. The UAC program capacity has expanded and contracted over the years, driven by the astonishing fluctuations over time in the number of children referred and the average time children remain in ORR care. Currently, HHS maintains about 14,300 beds nationwide. That's up from 6,500 beds on October 1st of 2017, but it's also down from 15,800 beds on November 15th, 2018. And HHS continues to adjust its bed capacity constantly based on the most recent data, including information from our interagency partners, to help us prepare for changing needs. HHS cares for all of these children until they are released to a suitable sponsor, almost always a parent or close relative, to provide care for them while they await their day in immigration court. These children also leave HHS's care if they return to their home countries pursuant to an immigration judge's order, or they turn 18 years of age, or they gain legal immigration status. In fiscal 2018, 49,100 children were referred to ORR by DHS. From October through February of this fiscal year, we've received over 24,000 referrals. In fiscal 2019 through February, children were discharged from ORR custody. 92% of them were released to individual sponsors, and of those sponsors, 46% were parents, 45% were close relatives, and 9% were more distant relatives or non-relatives. On June 20th, 2018, the President issued Executive Order 13841, and the U.S. District Court in the Southern District of California in Mizell versus ICE issued its preliminary injunction and class certification orders on June 26th. Pursuant to those, Secretary Azar tasked the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response to help us comply with that executive order, and then subsequently with those judges' orders. And to that end, we stood up an incident management team to reunify children with their parents. Of the 2,814 children reported to the Mizell Court, as of this morning, we have reunified 2,160 of them with a parent from whom they were separated. Another 595 children have left ORR care through other appropriate discharges, in most cases released to a family member sponsor. There are 16 children still in our care who were separated but can't be reunified with their parent, because we've made a final determination that that parent poses an unacceptable risk to the safety and well-being of that child. There are 32 children still in ORR care whose parents, after consulting with the ACLU, have waived reunification. And there are 9 children in care whose subsequent review determined had not in fact been separated from their parents, but were truly unaccompanied children. As of this week, of the 2,814 children reported to the Mizell Court, there are only 2 children remaining who might still one day be reunified. We can't reunify them at this time until the parent conveys their wishes to the ACLU. The UAC program's mission is a child welfare mission. We seek to serve the best interest of each individual child. That's guided us in everything we do, including in our work to have each separated child back in his or her parents' arms, or discharged safely to another family member sponsor when that's their parent's wish. We have done and will continue to do our best as a department to achieve that goal. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have for me about our program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commander White. Our final witness is Mr. Greg Cherundolo. Close. Mr. Cherundolo is the Chief of Operations for the Drug Enforcement Agency. He leads DEA's 222 domestic offices and 90 foreign offices. Mr. Cherundolo.
Good morning, Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Peters, and distinguished members of the committee. It's an honor to appear before you today to discuss Mexican cartels, the extent of their influence to manufacture, transport, and distribute illicit narcotics, and our efforts to combat this threat. I have had the honor and privilege of serving as a law enforcement official for 27 years, with the last 22 of those years being as a DEA special agent. When I reflect on those 27 years of experience, the sophistication and capacity of Mexican cartels is what worries me most. Dangerous and highly sophisticated transnational criminal organizations, or cartels, operating in both Mexico and the United States have been and will continue to be the most significant source of illicit narcotics trafficked inside the United States. Whether it's heroin or synthetic opioids, methamphetamine or marijuana, the Mexican cartels are the primary source of illicit drugs on our streets. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Mexican cartels has been the confluence of three things: the synthetic drug threat, the epidemic of opioid abuse, and the cartel's attempt to expand their profits by intentionally mixing fentanyl and fentanyl-related substances with heroin, counterfeit prescription drugs, and other illicit drugs, including cocaine and methamphetamine. This is done for one simple reason: greed. This is a national threat and a public health emergency fueled by fentanyl, which is cheap to make, hard to detect, and dangerously potent. Now consider this. Chinese and Mexican nationals are increasingly operating in concert, resulting in an alignment responsible for the proliferation of heroin, fentanyl, and related synthetics coming across our southwest border. Couple this with the fact that a kilogram of fentanyl can be purchased for less than $5,000 from China, and potential profits from the sale of that kilogram can exceed $1.5 million. The cartels are deliberately seizing on the suffering of thousands of individuals to generate profit. The same organizations are transporting methamphetamine and cocaine across the southwest border at an alarming rate. We cannot afford to lose our focus on cocaine and methamphetamine. The cartels are responsible for record amount of methamphetamine entering the United States, and recent increases in coca cultivation and cocaine production are particularly troubling, likely foreshadowing an increase in importation and abuse and overdose deaths. DEA anticipates that Mexican cartels such as the Sinaloa Cartel and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG, as well as others, will continue to be the primary networks operating in more than one country to plan and execute their criminal enterprises. These cartels do not observe boundaries or laws in Mexico, the United States, or any other country. As you know, in 2017, Mexico extradited Joaquin El Chapo Guzman to the United States, and he was just recently convicted in the Eastern District of New York. This is a major milestone, but more work needs to be done. Now, what is DEA doing to counter this threat? We recognize this will take persistent efforts across a broad spectrum to include interagency and global partnerships. For decades, we've maintained a worldwide presence to address the source of drugs. In Mexico, DEA continues to synchronize and expand capabilities to combat the growing epidemic. We have developed a bilateral heroin strategy for intelligence sharing, coordination of investigations, training, increased sharing of forensic information, and the control of precursor chemicals. We also participate in a North American drug dialogue, which focuses on building a strategy to attack the production, trafficking, consumption, and misuse of illicit narcotics in North America. DEA will continue to aggressively pursue criminals trafficking in illicit drugs. Targeting the world's most dangerous drug traffickers and their criminal organizations is a dynamic and evolving mission, and it comes with a myriad of challenges. Throughout our history, DEA has aggressively met those challenges and produced impressive results. We look forward to continue our work with you and your Senate colleagues to identify resources and authorities necessary to complete our mission, and I thank you for the opportunity to testify before the committee today on this important issue, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cherundolo. Again, I really appreciate the attendance here by members, so I'll defer my questioning till the end. We do have a vote we're going to deal with at 11 o'clock. My intention would be to keep the hearing going. hopefully we can get some cooperation by committee members. But with that, I'll turn it over to Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again to our witnesses for your testimony today. Mr. Chairman, I also have a letter here from the National Treasury Employees Union I'd like to submit for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. You know, a big part of what we've been trying to accomplish here in the last hearing and this hearing is trying to get just a sense of what are the facts on the ground that we can all agree on in a bipartisan way, take the rhetoric, push that all aside, and just figure out how we can deal with a significant problem. And related to that, of course, is having good data. You need to have the numbers, and the chairman is a numbers person, like I am. And we want to make sure that we're getting that kind of information. We're getting it on a timely basis, which has not really been happening. The GAO recently recommended that the DHS develop and implement a process to systemically review and look at the reliability of the data used in its border security metrics report. And identify any limitations in how it's used. So my question is for all the witnesses, are there any data points that we are not collecting now that would provide critical insight into these challenges that we're having in the border? I'd like to ask all of you if you have anything to share related to what we're not collecting now that you think we should be. Chris, you want to start us off?
Senator, we collect a lot of information right now, but I think we also need to go a little further in regards to the finances of what exactly criminal organizations are making. I think that is key. I mean, we all have our ideas on how much money flows into the hands of criminal organizations, whether it's the brush guide, whether it's the transportation cell, the stash house operators. I think we collectively need to get better at sharing that information is to attack the finances. I don't think that we're going to be able to interdict our way out of this problem without attacking the finances. So I definitely would think that more financial information in data shared between the different agencies would be helpful.
I agree with everything that Chief Kerr said, and you know, we're an information agency. We collect lots of data points, everything that we do, the migrants that are intersecting, the different modes of narcotics that are coming through our border, working with our interagencies, just to continue to work together with our interagencies and sharing information and building on those trends, so we continue to target the narcotic threat.
So I can tell you specifically for us as Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Homeland Security Investigations, that is very important to us in everything that we do, justifying our operations, targeting, showing results for the end of the year, staffing, et cetera. And we're very meticulous about our stats. And I can tell you even today, coming forward to be here to testify in front of you, we're very careful about the stats that we report, the information that we report, and we want to make sure that we report that correctly. But we do look very closely at the money laundering, the finances. Every criminal investigation that we conduct, whether it's human smuggling, whether it's narcotics, weapons, child exploitation, child pornography, intellectual property rights, we have specific groups that just look at finances. And that's information that we collect very closely and very carefully, and I think that's something we could share with our partners in DHS and just across DHS as far as sharing of information. If there was a one DHS information compiler and share, I think that would be beneficial to all of us. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Commander?
I don't think we have sort of data points that we're missing. I think the effectiveness of our agency is sometimes challenged by the fact that we are a child welfare agency in a surrounding law enforcement process. And I think there continue to be challenges with exchange of information because of the inherent challenges we have receiving some law enforcement sensitive information that would enable us to make the safest placement decisions we could for a child, including receiving 213 information on children and those accompanying them. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Senator, I don't think there's a data point that my partners here at the table don't already collect related to the specific border. However, the one data point that we can point to, at least from a perspective of Chinese and Mexican trafficking groups trafficking in fentanyl, is that how the class scheduling of fentanyl and fentanyl analogs has affected when we look at the data points that we look at across our seizures and as a result of our investigations, we find that any time that our Chinese counterparts have controlled fentanyl or fentanyl analogs, it's decreased the number of seizures in us seeing that analog here in the United States. And because those groups are working together to get fentanyl into the United States, I think that's helped us to reduce the amount of fentanyl that's leading to overdoses in the United States. But as far as the border-related data points, I think our partners have covered down well on that, and we continue to share information back and forth as a result of our investigations and what they're doing as well.
Thank you. Well, I've all heard you talk about sharing of data. So my question to you, Commander White, is that in January, the HHS OIG concluded that the agency faced significant challenges in identifying separated children, including, and this is quote, including the lack of an existing integrated data system to track separated families across HHS and DHS. So, Commander White, based on your experience as the federal health coordinating official for the mission and reunifying children who are separated, could you tell us more about that? What are the gaps? What do we need to be doing to make sure that we are able to identify where these separated children are?
So as a reminder, we are able in ORR to tell you for any child who has been in our care to whom we release that child, what the relationship of that person to the child was and the address that they had when we released them. But, and I think this is key, while we now know every child who was in our care on the 26th of June, of those 12,000 children, whether each child was separated or not separated. What we don't know, and what HHS OIG correctly documented, is that we still don't know how many of the children we had already released to a family member had been separated and referred to us. But the problem is not one of interagency data sharing per se. The problem is that children were separated and no record was kept of it. That is not a data exchange problem. It is also more fundamentally the problem that the Unaccompanied Alien Children program is designed for unaccompanied children, not separated children. And orderly systems for exchange of data do not undo the harm caused by separating children from their parents. That is the proper focus for all congressional inquiries about separation. What are the legitimate conditions under which a child may be separated from a parent at the border? What are the appropriate systems, including what kind of rights of remedy and appeal does a parent have? And how can ORR and DHS have equal power to determine if a child is accompanied or unaccompanied so that ORR may refuse a referral of a child who is in fact accompanied? The issue is not how well it was tracked. The issue is that it happened at all.
Well said, Commander. Thank you for that testimony. Appreciate it.
Commander, as long as we're on this topic, just real quick, reading your testimony, seemed like a real challenge was complying with the court order in terms of what the definition was of a separated child. And there's real legitimate reasons to separate a child from adult. For example, we heard in testimony that an adult male finally admitted that the one-year-old child was not his. Can you just quick speak to that?
We have always seen appropriate separations of children, both from parents and from people who claim to be their parents fraudulently. And it's our experience that our colleagues in DHS very honorably attempt to confront a really difficult set of challenges when they apprehend a minor. The real problem is that there is no statutory guidance when a child may be separated, under what conditions, what's a permissible reason. There will always be some children separated from parents for reasons of the child's safety or the need to immediately criminally prosecute someone with, for example, felony warrants. There will always be children separated from individuals who fraudulently claim to be parents who are not. But that is different from what we saw over the last year.
But again, I just want to understand your testimony. Part of the problem and part of the confusion here is for years we've been doing legitimate separations for a host of reasons, and part of complying with this was trying to figure out exactly what matched the dictates of the court order, correct?
The historical norm is that about 0.3% of all referrals are separations. In the fall of 2017, that increased tenfold to 3%. By the spring, it was much higher than that as a percentage. So the issue is, how do we determine what are the reasonable standards for separation? And that is a job for Congress.
So there again, we need some legislation. Senator Portman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding the hearing and for each of you for your service. These are difficult times, aren't they? And all of you have been in this business for a long time, looked at your resumes. You probably have never experienced something quite like this, the influx of particularly families and kids. We're in a crisis on the border. We certainly are. And it's worse in terms of families and kids than it was when President Obama called it so, a crisis. So I appreciate what you're doing. I have focused a lot on the pull factors. The push factors are also important. What we do with these Northern Triangle countries, Guatemala, Salvador, Honduras, is incredibly important. But that's going to be a longer-term prospect. Short-term, I want to ask, if you don't mind, Mr. Karsh, Mr. Howe, Mr. Tubbs, do you believe that people who are coming here, family units and otherwise, are coming here primarily for economic reasons and primarily to get a job that pays better for their families?
Sir, based on what I've seen out in the field at this point in time, vast majority are coming here for economic reasons or, of course, for family reunification. I'm not saying that there are not credible fear claims or asylum claims out there that are true.
And I'm not either. You know, I think that number is about 85% of those who seek asylum are not getting asylum because they can't meet the criteria. But my question to you is, do you think most folks are coming here for economic reasons?
Yes.
To get a better job? Chow?
Agree, Senator. The same, and the numbers prove that out with the 85% that are being declined.
Mr. Tubbs?
Yes, sir, I would agree that they're coming here for economic reasons. And that's, anytime we look at unaccompanied children or family units, one of the things that we look at specifically as HSI or doing our criminal investigations is to ensure that there is no family fraud, to look at the welfare of the child, that there's no case where they're put in a situation for child exploitation. And it's also a reason why we've increased our worksite enforcement, our interior enforcement, because that really is a pull factor.
Let me focus on that for a second. Would it surprise you to know that under our current E-Verify system, one, it's not mandatory. Two, often people can use a fake ID, a fraudulent ID, Social Security card or driver's license, and so we don't have a system that's effective to know who's legal or who's not, so that the employer can make that determination. I mean, that's what we have now, correct? Would you support a mandatory E-Verify system so that we can help to reduce the magnet, the pull? Go ahead. Mr. Howe, you came to the mic first.
Absolutely. We would support that. Anything that would reduce the pull factor.
Mr. Karsh?
Yes, sir.
Stubbs?
Any tool that we get is going to help us greatly.
Yeah, we have a bipartisan proposal to do that, and I think that is something that sometimes we miss in this conversation about the border, as important as it is to have a secure border. When you have that kind of a pull factor, that kind of magnet, people find a way, don't they, to get through, over, or around the border. Commander White, you and I have gotten to know each other. I believe you are a compassionate person, and I think you care a lot for these kids. I think you've been in a very tough situation. You've talked about that today. I know there's now a discussion about reinstating the zero-tolerance policy, which led to the family separations you talked about earlier. What was the effect on ORR, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, last year when the administration implemented the zero-tolerance policy?
So the effect of zero tolerance or of other policies that resulted in separating children from family units. As a reminder, the great majority of children who cross our border each day are accompanied. They're part of family units. Most typically, they are with a parent, and they are accompanied. So the first thing that happened to the program is that the program's capacity was overwhelmed. But to say that sort of understates the severity of the harm, because it was overwhelmed with children that we are not prepared to serve easily, because ordinarily the great majority of the children that we receive, about 80% of them, are teenagers. But when you separate children from their parents, we get babies and toddlers and other very young children. So as you know, of the 2814 children, 107 of them were 4 years of age or younger. Our specific capacity that states have licensed to serve what we call tender age, under 12, and very young, 5 and under children, was exceeded. This puts these children at significant risk. And of course, it also bears repeating that separating children from their parents entails very significant risk of severe psychological harm to those children, and that is an indisputed scientific fact.
Commander, you also have a PhD, so you have some credibility in terms of understanding that dynamic. Well, let me ask you this. If we were to do it again tomorrow, you have said earlier in your testimony there was a systems breakdown. Do we have the infrastructure to handle it, yes or no?
We have made improvements to our tracking. We do not have the capacity to receive that number of children, nor do we have the capacity to serve them, nor is it possible to build a system that would prevent the mass traumatization of children.
Okay. And Mr. Howe, I think you would agree that your detention facilities are full right now. I'm talking about your broader detention facilities, not just for unaccompanied kids or kids who are separated. So we don't have the capacity right now, the infrastructure. Is that accurate?
Well, at our ports of entry, we don't have long-term detention, but at the end of the process through ICRO, yes, we're full.
Yeah, we're full. By the way, Commander White, has anybody consulted with you about the idea of reinstating the zero tolerance policy?
No. No, sir.
Okay. You get about 200 to 300 kids a day now coming in, unaccompanied kids. You've got about 12,000 kids in your care. You're working on this court order to try to reunify kids, but I'm talking about just unaccompanied kids who come in. Let me ask you just briefly about your problem you've had in getting sponsors. You know, we were very concerned here in this committee and elsewhere that you were sending kids out to sponsors who were traffickers. In one case in Ohio, as you know, the Marion egg case, egg farm case, we had kids who were literally given back to the traffickers who'd brought them up from Guatemala, and they abused these kids. There have been, by the way, 7 indictments now in that case of traffickers. But let me ask you, how are you doing now with sponsors? I mean, we wanted to be sure that the sponsors were fingerprinted, that there was a way to understand who these people were, so you weren't giving kids out to traffickers again. You put that in place. My understanding is there was concern about ICE and others following up with those individuals, and therefore your sponsorship pretty much dried up. Now you have more sponsors coming back because in the appropriations bill, I guess we've said that ICE can't follow up from an immigration perspective. Is that accurate? So tell us how this is working.
So we continually adjust our case management vetting methods to try and find the right balance between safety in discharge, and timeliness in discharge. We grossly failed in 2014, those children in that egg farm case, and that led to a revolutionary change inside the program about our standards. Our standards now are not comparable to what they were then. But in 2017, I would submit that we actually pushed safety so far that it broke discharge. And children stayed in care an unprecedented average length of time. And our discharge rate, which is for every 100 children in care, how many get discharged every day? So that fell to below 1%. This is why the Tornillo temporary influx facility was stood up. That was a direct consequence of the combination of separation and falling discharge rate. By making appropriate changes, including now we only, under our current operational directive, we only do fingerprint background checks. We do all the other kinds of background checks on every sponsor, but we only do fingerprint background checks on parents if there's another red flag, another indication of danger. Our discharge rate is back up to 2%. The average length of time of children in care continues. But I want to be clear, we studied every case where we denied a discharge to a parent based on the fingerprints, and we didn't find cases where we did that on fingerprint only. We found the identified threats to those children's safety through the numerous other methods that we use at identity verification, relationship verification, and child safety. We're in a different world than we were in 2014, but we will continue to make changes as we need to balance safety and timeliness in discharge. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
As long as we're talking about discharge to sponsors, we just got some information from HHS. I just want you to confirm this, Commander Howe. Between July 2018 and January 2019, there were a total of 23,445 unaccompanied children or children discharged to a sponsor. 18,459 of those were discharged to someone without legal status. Is that a pretty accurate figure?
I don't have in front of me the numbers, but those numbers would be consistent with general patterns. The majority of sponsors, individual sponsors, are people without immigration status.
Which indicates, and I'll just enter this, ask for consent to enter this in the record, just shows again how completely out of control this process is right now. Senator Hassan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank you and the ranking member for this hearing today. And I want to particularly thank our witnesses. Thank you for your service. Thank you as well to all the men and women who you work with each and every day. Before I begin my questions, though, I do also want to express my profound concern about the turmoil at the topmost levels of the Department of Homeland Security. The department is tasked with the vital mission of securing the nation from the many threats we face. And the type of turnover we are seeing right now presents a direct threat to the ability to effectively carry out that mission. We need to see qualified leaders put forward who have the experience needed to keep Americans safe and who will also stand up to the president, if necessary, to uphold the rule of law and the values that make us strong. I want to turn now to a question to Mr. Howe and Mr. Cherundolo, because last Congress, we passed and the President signed a bill that would provide more technology for border agents to use so that they could detect fentanyl at the border. Last spring, when I was at the border, I heard during my visit that the agents still did not have all the access to that equipment. Former Secretary Nielsen stated that this was unacceptable when she testified before this committee last May. So, to both of you, can one of you update the committee on how the Interdict Act implementation is going now? Do our agents have the technology they need to keep them safe as they're detecting fentanyl?
Thank you for the question, Senator. The $564 million that you speak of,
yep,
the NII enhancements for FY19, that's going to really change the way we do business on the southwest border. Okay. It's really going to transform our capability to scan more vehicles and more trucks, considerably more than we're doing today. So it's going to take some time to work with the vendors to purchase and get them into place, but it really is going to transform where we're doing the interdiction. We know that through our mail facilities,
yep,
that we're seeing fentanyl. So the $45 million that we received also,
yep,
FY19, will allow us to enhance our NII, our non-intrusive inspection technology, in both our mail facilities and our express confinements.
Okay, but so it is still a work in progress, is what you're telling me, that we don't have all the technology that is provided by the funding yet?
We're working through it. It's going to take some time.
Okay. Mr. Cherundolo, do you have anything to add?
Senator, the only thing I would add that any of that is welcome to us, because many times those seizures at the border are the start of an investigation, right, for both DEA and HSI. We would support any advanced technology that can be given to our colleagues on the border, but those wouldn't specifically apply to DEA.
Okay, thank you. I am still concerned that we don't have as much equipment as we need. I'm very concerned about the safety of the people on the front lines. Fentanyl, as we all know, is so dangerous even to the touch. I will look forward to following up with the agency about how we can accelerate this. Commander White, I wanted to follow up a little bit with you on the discussion that you've just been having about the family separation policy and the efforts that your agency has made to reunite families and children. You talked about the numbers in the Ms. L case, the class of individuals represented by the ACLU, but we also know that there are other children, and you just mentioned it in your testimony, who before the policy was announced were apparently separated from their families. When you appeared before this committee last year and just now, you were very clear about the impact of family separation on children, that children are traumatized this and can suffer long-term psychological damage from this kind of separation. And I thank you for your clarity and your honesty on that issue. But that's why I was so troubled to see your statement a few days ago stating that it could take 2 years to identify what could be thousands of children who were separated from their families. Can you tell me why it will take so long and what we can do to speed this up?
Yes, Senator. So what the Senator is referring to is my declaration and the plan which I developed and which the government has submitted to Judge Chabraw in the Southern District of California on how we would do that identification. I want to be clear. The 1 to 2 year time frame is if we reviewed all of the approximately 47,000 children who were referred by DHS starting on July 1st, 2017, and had already been discharged to a family member or otherwise appropriately discharged by the date of the court hearing. The plan, this is in the declaration, is designed to accelerate that process. I don't know that it will, but it represents my personal belief of the best, most effective way to find the children, to identify which of the children that were discharged were separated, and to do so as fast as is possible. But the answer to your question is because it is 47,000 children. They have all been discharged, and there is no list. This is the fundamental reality. The reason that it is challenging now is because there is no list of separated children. We must identify them. So we will use, if the judge approves it, the methods that I've outlined. And if he doesn't approve it, without getting too much into litigation, then I guess we will all be back to the drawing board. I believe that the plan, which is in my declaration, is the best way to find those, to identify who the kids were. That's why.
Yes or no, would more staff help you do it faster?
I don't believe that staffing is the key variable.
Okay. Would you please commit to submitting to me any recommendations you could make in terms of resources or other things Congress could provide to you that would help you speed that process up?
Yes, ma'am, I'll make that commitment. As a reminder, this is before the judge currently, and I'm awaiting his direction.
I understand that. And Commander White, I just also wanted to, again, thank you for being clear about the impact of what has been an inhumane and un-American policy of family separation. And I take it from your comments earlier in your exchange with Senator Portman that you do not support reinstating this policy.
I would never support the use of family separation, the systematic traumatization of children as a tool of immigration policy, but it's not about what I support. Senator, it's about what you and your colleagues support. And it is up to you to define the conditions under which a child may be separated. Congress hasn't done that, and you need to.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much, but I also appreciate that I believe that this administration should not move forward with family separation. I believe there are other ways we can secure our borders, and I appreciate very much the input and the feedback that you have all provided to us today. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Cherundolo, I have a question I'll submit to the record for you about southbound trafficking of guns and cash going over from the United States to Mexico. I'd like to follow up with you about how we can slow that kind of traffic.
We'd be happy to get you the information, Senator.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Langford and I was told the vote was delayed by about 10 minutes, so we got plenty of time for both you and Senator Romney if you're sticking around.
We'll take it from there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commander White, the children that are being placed in homes, the UACs specifically, you said the vast majority of those you're placing in homes of someone who is also not legally present in the United States. So this is typically teenagers, and what percentage do you expect are being placed in homes of someone who is not legally present in the United States?
I don't know a percentage. I can say only that it is the very great majority. So
we're talking 80%, we're talking 55%?
I would assume it would be closer to 80, but I don't have an exact percentage.
Okay, how can we get that number?
We can work to the extent that we have it to provide it to you.
So you're saying the vast majority we suspect are not legally present or we know are not legally present?
I would have to get back to you on that.
So in the background check, are we trying to verify if this person is legally present or not? Or just if they have a criminal record in the United States?
The background check in many cases does indeed look at immigration issues subject to what we get from interagency partners. But what we do, and so in each individual case, we would know the immigration status of the sponsor. But that doesn't mean that we have ready aggregate reporting. So that's why I don't have it at my fingertips.
Help me understand. So you do know for each sponsor if they're legally present or not?
Based on the records we receive from other agencies, yes.
So then, couldn't we just get a percentage then of those individuals, the UACs that have been placed? What percentage have been placed in homes of someone who's not legally
Senator
present?
Langford, really quick, in front of you, that's why I just entered the record. 79% from whatever the dates were placed with the sponsor with no legal status.
Right.
I think the other thing to point out is fingerprints only tell you whether you have a criminal record in America. They don't do, okay?
Right. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Is so the background check is verifying whether they have a criminal record in the United States.
We seek, to the extent we can get it, to also get information on criminal history in the country of origin.
Okay. This is just an ongoing issue because we have parents or relatives that have come to the United States illegally across the border, who've worked here for years, who have sent a message back home, and then they're out paying someone to be able to transition them through Mexico to be able to come here, and then we're delivering them the last mile back to their families to be able to reunite families in that sense of someone who's not legally present here, and then also with a child that they transited with someone who's a non-relative through Mexico to get here. Is that the typical story, mostly teenagers?
It is mostly teenagers. I don't have any way of knowing how many of them it was the parent that did the transition, but the scenario you described would not be uncommon.
Okay, thank you. In our hearing last week, TVPRA and Flores came up as the two biggest issues by far. Mr. Garces, you were very clear to just say Congress needs to act. Last week, it was very specific. What we need Congress to do is address Flores and TVPRA. Is that your opinion of what needs to be addressed?
Yes, agree. To allow families to stay together through the Flores Agreement and then the TVRP to allow the repatriation to non-contiguous countries.
Okay, Mr. Garces.
Completely agree.
How many individuals do we have coming in, family groups that are coming from Mexico?
Very small number right now, Senator. I mean, the vast majority, 65.
So give me a ballpark guess.
Yeah,
is this 2% or is this?
I would have to get those numbers for you. I mean, but 65% on the Central American families that we're seeing coming across the border, but very small percentage of Mexicans with families.
Saying 65%, is that what you said?
Yes.
Those are families from
Central America,
Central
Triangle
America?
countries.
So the other 35% of the folks are coming from where?
Well, Mexico, but we're also seeing them from different parts of the world in the people that we apprehend. But
you'd mentioned just in your region there are 50 different nations represented. I didn't get the time period on that. Is that this fiscal year?
Just for this fiscal year, yes.
Okay. So in the last 6 months, you've seen 50 different countries coming that are family units.
Not family units, single adults who are trying to evade arrest.
Okay. So go ahead, Ms. Shaw. So the question becomes very difficult here on how to be able to manage the personnel. Ms. Shaw, you mentioned before when you pull people off of the land ports of entries to be able to manage what's happening between ports of entries, it has a real effect. 4 hours of wait time for a truck to be able to get in and going all the way through an entire day, and there are some trucks that never got processed. They go in the next day, makes the next day even harder, obviously, as well to be able to move. What do you see as the snowball effect of having to be able to move people to the between ports of entries to what's happening at the land ports of entries for long-term shipping and trade?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I think you've stated it, and that is, we've pulled 545 frontline officers that normally work cargo and passenger vehicles. And what we're seeing is what I mentioned in my opening remarks. We're seeing double the wait times in both POV and cargo. And this is an immediate response to the crisis that we're seeing in between the ports of entry.
The issue of fake families was brought up. Individuals that are coming with a child that is not their own or not directly related to. How has that changed in the last year or two and what you've seen?
I will tell you that back in 2014, less than 1% of the males that were apprehended actually came with a child. Right now, it's 50%. So
50%?
50% of the males that are coming into this country right now have a child with them. They recognize that because of the Flores settlement is that they're not going to be kept in custody. So, I mean, that shows you exactly how they are exploiting the system. And right now, because of volume, it is very difficult for us to spend a great deal of time in interviewing every single person.
So our laws are incentivizing people to be able to travel with a child. In other words, if you get in with a child and put a child through this trauma of all the travel and the transit, then you get a more expedited process when you get here.
Yes.
The question is on of a child that is not related to the person or is very distant related to the person they're traveling with. What percentage of people or what kind of numbers are we talking about? Is this 2,000, 3,000? How many have we seen this year?
So I'll have to take that one back for the record. I don't have that offhand, but I can tell you that we have seen the fraudulent family units. We have seen the recycled children.
So when you say recycled children, that's a child that's come,
yes.
somehow they were sent back over and they're
Yes.
showing up again.
And we've also seen, I talked about it earlier, in the fact that the criminal organizations are making significant profits out of the smuggling. People that are released with documents from our facilities, meaning that they can travel anywhere in the country, have been found in stash houses in Houston because they still haven't paid off the criminal organizations. So that shows you just how much control the smuggling organizations have. In RGV, there are 4 specific areas where all family units are routed to. Every other zone in the sector is reserved for narcotics. So very controlled, very organized, very structured.
Mr. Chairman, this is an area that if we don't fix the law, we're continuing to look away from human smuggling. And that is something we should not look away from and should not ignore. And what I keep hearing over and over again from every panel is they need Congress to act on these areas or this never gets better.
What I said in the opening statement, this is a problem in the here and now, and we need to act now. I thought it was interesting in last week's hearing, the witnesses said that the border is completely controlled on the southern side by the drug cartels. Nobody's moving through there without paying the fee, paying the ransom, basically. So we need to recognize this. We need to act. Senator Romney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member, as well, for holding this hearing. I want to say thank you to the individuals that you serve with. Your service and their service is a great tribute to our nation and is critical to our national security and to our commitment to principles of human dignity. I must admit that I'm sure, like many people, deeply troubled about the vacancies at the Department of Homeland Security and the transition process that has been carried out with regards to those vacancies. I think it is dangerous given what's happening at the border, dangerous given the broad responsibility that the Department of Homeland Security has for protecting our nation. It is seriously troubling. Let me turn with something specific that relates to your testimony. If there were no fence, if there were no Border Patrol agents, if there were no ICE, and we just said, hey, anybody that wants to come to this country, come on in, my expectation is you would have tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions or more people who'd say, yeah, I'd rather live in the United States of America than somewhere else, and for many, many reasons. And we're certainly not suggesting that, but I do believe that we need to put in place processes and measures legislatively, as the chairman has indicated, but perhaps other ways as well, to make sure that we do secure our border and that we have systems that don't attract people here in such huge numbers. We have legislative fixes that need to come both short-term and long-term. And like Senator Portman, who described the importance of E-Verify, I would underscore at least my personal view that mandatory E-Verify for hiring in this country is essential if we're going to turn off the magnet that draws people into the country illegally. But the challenges that you've each described today have suggested to me that we do need to have a legislative fix, and I'm going to ask you not for data about something with which you are personally highly familiar, but instead with regards to legislation. What should we do? If you had the opportunity to counsel the entire Congress as to what action we should take to make sure that our border is more secure, that our children that are being separated are given better care, that we resolve this extraordinary challenge that we face, what legislative action do you think is action that we should be taking? And I'll let you each, whichever order you'd like to go in, respond to that question. I may have to leave before all your answers are given because of a vote that's underway that will be over in just a few minutes. But please, why don't we begin with you, Mr. Koresh.
So I think it's addressing Flores, it's addressing TVPRA, but I will also say this. We should have a system in place that for somebody who has a credible fear or asylum, that they walk into an embassy in those triangle countries, file your claim there. We get them out of this dangerous journey. whether it's coming to the borders in Arizona or South Texas, is to do away with this problem. Because unfortunately right now, as I previously mentioned, criminal organizations are the only ones who are benefiting from what's happening. They're making enormous amounts of money. So we've got to establish a process where we are continuing to admit those people that truly have a fear, but yet eliminate a lot of the fraud that's going into some of the claims at this time.
Thank you.
Yeah, adjusting Flores so the families can be held together and that VRP in order to allow return directly to non-contiguous countries.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I would absolutely support the same as far as the Flores and the TVPRA. You know, immigration as a whole, from workers' permits all the way up to obtaining U.S. citizenship, is something the U.S. government needs to look at, just because of the history of our immigration laws. But I think besides the legislative fix, we also absolutely need to have a secure border. I mean, there's no reason anything that crosses the border between ports of entry is illegal. And we as a U.S. government should be able to control the border between the ports of entry. We're always going to facilitate the flow of commerce at the port. We understand that. But between the ports of entry, we should be able to control that, period.
Yeah, thank you. Commander?
First, you should in statute define the conditions under which it is permissible to remove a child from a parent. And I would submit to you that that should only be for the safety of the child, or if the parent faces criminal charges other than misdemeanor 1325 entry. Second, parents need to have there needs to be a requirement that there be a process and documentation when children are separated from a parent, and parents need to have a right to appeal that. And third, ORR needs the legal authority along with DHS, equal to DHS, to determine if a child is unaccompanied, so that if a child is referred to us who is truly accompanied and has simply been separated from a parent not for cause, we can refuse that referral.
Senator, on top of what my partners from DHS have already highlighted, I would say the one single piece of legislation that DEA would say would be very important to us is the class-wide scheduling of fentanyl. We emergency scheduled that fentanyl last year, and it expires in 2020, which could have a significant impact on not only DEA and our law enforcement partners in prosecuting those analogs where the chemical makeup of the fentanyl is changed slightly, but it will also affect the Department of Justice prosecuting of those cases and motions going forward if the fentanyl were to come out of scheduling, the emergency scheduling in 2020.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to go vote.
Senator, before you go, I do want to point out that if you claim asylum, if you come to this country illegally, you claim asylum, we give you a work permit after 6 months. Is that correct? So, I mean, E-Verify is, I guess, well and good, but when we are actually granting a work permit for somebody coming to this country illegally after 6 months, it's another one of those rewards that we provide, which I think we ought to seriously consider. Senator Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's hearing takes on new significance, obviously, in the wake of Secretary Nielsen's resignation. As I said in June of 2018, I believe the government should be in the business of keeping families together and not tearing them apart. The outgoing Secretary's willingness to implement the administration's cruel and most counterproductive immigration policies, and her willingness to, frankly, not be honest with Congress when questioned about these policies, led me to call back in June of 2018 for her resignation. The government should have a commitment to truth and accountability. Under the Secretary's tenure, DHS had a track record of neither. However, she was reportedly forced out because she resisted the White House's desire to embrace even more extreme tactics, from defying a court order and reinstating the cruel family separation policy to closing the southern border, a political stunt that would cause dire economic consequences to our country. And there are reports that even more turnover in DHS's leadership is yet to come. I believe a well-functioning Department of Homeland Security is vital to the safety and security of our nation. At moments like this, Congress must exercise its duty to provide a check on the executive branch through oversight, through the power of the purse, and through our responsibility to provide advice and consent. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join together in helping to restore some of the much-needed stability to the Department of Homeland Security and to respect and honor the work of the men and women who work there. Commander White, I have some questions for you.
Yes, ma'am.
On March 6th, CBP Commissioner McAleenan, now the Acting Secretary of Homeland Security, testified before the Judiciary Committee. I questioned him about reports that immigrant children in the custody of HHS and HHS's Office of Refugee Resettlement endured sexual harassment and assault. ORR received 4,556 allegations between October of 2014 and July of 2018, nearly 200 of which included very serious allegations, such as staff watching children shower, fondling and kissing them, and rape. According to Justice Department data, sexual abuse allegations in shelters skyrocketed at the peak of the family separation crisis last spring and summer. The acting secretary said that he was not aware of the allegations and that his colleagues at HHS and ORR are very committed to the children in their care. But when I asked him whether after learning of these allegations he believed he had a duty to voice concern about the safety of the children before transferring them to HHS's custody, he said that doing so was, quote, the duty of the management and leadership of Health and Human Services. Commander White, you are obviously here today representing the management and leadership of HHS. Do you agree with him? And what, if any, concern do you have about the findings? And what are you prepared to do about it?
So 3 things. First of all, thank you, Senator. I do want to talk, in fact, we probably should talk much longer than this forum will allow, about the protection of children in our care. Let me start with one thing to be absolutely clear. If even one child is abused in OR care, we failed that child.
Yep.
We failed that child. And this is also true of every child welfare system in the United States and every foster care system in every state. Every time a child in care is abused, the system failed that child. I don't excuse it. I don't permit it. Every time it happens, it is a call to do more. Now, the statistics that have been reported do require clarification because we have a strict policy of reporting events, and many of these things that are reported as sexual abuse under our PREA requirements are things like are actually sexually inappropriate conduct by minors. This could include if a minor makes a sexual gesture, that's reportable. If a minor uses a sexually charged insult for another minor, that's reportable. There are, however, there are also cases at the upper end of the spectrum that include allegations of abuse by minors of each other, and in some cases by grantee staff, never federal staff.
Sir, before you continue, are you describing theoretically what happens in the department? Are you referring specifically to the 4,556 allegations that occurred between October of 2014 and July of 2018? I really would be interested, and am only interested, in the nature of the allegations that occurred during that period of time.
Yes, Senator. I'm talking about the actual reports. And many of these PREA reports are not, in fact, allegations of sexual abuse. They're allegations of sexually inappropriate behavior. We have a universal reporting standard for our programs. They must report in writing within 4 hours of every reportable event. These do include some cases which resulted in criminal prosecution because we are required in every case to notify state, local, and federal law enforcement and licensure authorities for full investigation.
Can you tell me, sir, how many of the allegations involved abuse by HHS employees or other staff or adults working in these facilities, whomever employed them? For example, I know you have contractors and private entities that are also handling or working with these children.
Yes, there is 0 allegations against HHS staff. If you give me just a moment.
How many allegations are there against adults?
There are allegations reported to ORR of staff on minors in fiscal 18, 49 reports, and 6 reports of other adults who weren't staff. It could be someone who somehow got in the building or something like that. Non-staff adult on minors, so a total of 54 allegations in fiscal 18. These are among the cases that would have been reported to the FBI,
So this is
OIG,
103 in 1 year. How about for the total of those 4 years? How many adults on children allegations are there?
That's I believe 55 in 1 year.
You said 49 plus 54.
No, 54 total, 49 and 6, 54 total. And 53 in fiscal 17 of allegations of an adult reported to DOJ. These are cases we reported to DOJ.
How many in 2016?
In 2016, reported to DOJ, there were 62 allegations of an adult sexual abuse of a minor.
Okay, my time is running out. I'd like you to report to this committee how many total allegations were there between that 4-year period against adults, whomever employed them, regardless of whether the case was referred to DOJ or not. And I'd also ask you right now to tell us whether you informed the Department of Homeland Security that these incidents were taking place in your facilities before or at any time during the course of this family separation policy. And obviously, because I'm curious to know whether the Department of Homeland Security was on notice that these things were happening in your facilities before they transferred the children to your care.
So we will be providing a full detailed accounting that will be forthcoming on our PREA reporting. Second, I don't know whether our PREA reporting was conveyed to leadership at DHS. As a reminder, our programs are still safer than state foster care systems.
Sir, I don't think that we want to compare what you're doing to state foster care systems, which are notoriously horrendous conditions for many children.
Precisely what I am saying, and I say it again, is that every time something happens to a child, we have failed that child.
I agree with you.
But the traumatization of children by separation does not need any child to have been harmed criminally by an adult. That act of the government entails harm to a child. Mm-hmm. So these are two important problems, but they're separate problems.
Thank you.
Senator Harris, you raised the issue of rumors of reinstitution of the zero tolerance policy. I'm not aware of that as a policy. I'm aware of the rumors in the press. Let me just state, for the record, I would be completely opposed to that. My guess that's a majority, if not a unanimous, view of the members of this committee. And let me just cite you some reasons. Commander White, I think you would say that
I refer to a family separation policy.
Family zero tolerance, whatever you want to call it, resulted in family separation. I think you would state that during April, May, and June, when that zero tolerance policy was in effect, HHS was pretty well overwhelmed by this. Would you say that's true?
That's correct. Both our total capacity and specifically our capacity to serve very young children, since separation disproportionately results in our getting babies, toddlers, and young children.
So again, I'm hoping members of the administration, if they're actually considering this, are listening to that testimony. And as Senator Peters pointed out, I like numbers. So here are the numbers. During April, May, or June, on average, we apprehended about 9,500 individuals as a family unit that you were forced to deal with, about 9,500. The last 3 months, which again shows the growing crisis at our border, the average has been 29,000. So if HHS, if CBP were overwhelmed back in April, May, or June of 2018 with 9,500 per month, this is 3 times worse. And my guess is this is going to continue to increase in severity. So again, this is a crisis in the here and now. We need legislation. And I would like this committee to lead in that effort. And certainly as chairman, I will be leading and hopefully working with every member of the committee to pass the legislation that actually fixes this problem in the here and now. Senator Carper.
Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you very much for being here, for your work. My colleagues have heard me say this before, so bear with me, but we all have sources that provide us with guidance in our lives and the values that we hold and the way we try to behave and act. There's believe it or not, a bipartisan Bible study that meets in the United States Senate every Thursday, about 6 or 7 of us who need the most help. We meet with the chaplain of the Senate, who is a retired Navy admiral, who was chief of chaplains for the Navy and the Marine Corps. And almost every Thursday when we meet, he reminds us of a passage in the book of Matthew that deals with the least of these. And when I was hungry, when I was thirsty, when I was naked, when I was a stranger in your land, did you welcome me? And he reminds us of the moral obligation we have to the least of these, including the stranger in our land. He also reminds us of the greatest commandment of all, and that is the golden rule. Treat other people the way we want to be treated, which ironically is in every major religion on the planet, everyone in one form or the other. So when I approach a dilemma, a challenge like we have on our border, I try to keep those words in mind going forward. I also am somebody who focuses like a laser on root causes, not on symptoms of problems, but what are the root causes. And as you know, the root causes for a lot of folks coming into our country from Honduras, Guatemala, and Salvador are lack of economic opportunity and hope in the Northern Triangle, prevalence of violence and crime in those three countries, and also corruption. Those are the three drivers. And the reason why we created the Alliance for Prosperity with those three buckets, lack of economic opportunity and hope, crime and violence, and corruption, is because that's what we gathered from people coming to us to say, this is why I'm leaving, this is why I don't want to stay in my country. Ironically, I was just down in a Codell, about 6 weeks ago, and to see how we're doing with the Alliance for Prosperity. And I was actually pretty encouraged by the work that's being done. And I think it's important that we not walk away from it. And the president, I think, is intent on ending funding for those programs, which would be a huge mistake, a huge mistake. I've been sitting up here writing some notes to myself about how to reduce the likelihood that people will feel compelled to leave their countries and to come to ours. And for me, a big answer is fully execute, and execute well, the Alliance for Prosperity. It's modeled after the plan Colombia, which has worked. And I like to say, find out what works, do more of that. So that's the second question I have for people who do leave. And we've been messaging countries in those leaders in those countries have been messaging to their people about the horrors of transiting Mexico and trying to get into this country and saying it's not going to work well and kind of discouraging people from coming. Well, that ain't working so well because they're coming in ever larger numbers, as you know. So I'm trying to figure out what is the most humane way to deal with the families that make it to our borders, and is there a way that we can actually keep the families together? Expedite the amount of time, reduce the amount of time that they have to wait to make an initial judgment as to whether or not someone who's seeking asylum, asking for asylum, really is in that kind of danger back in their native land. So a way to do that. And while we're doing that, quickly provide for a safe place for these folks, for these families to stay. And so let me just start with that. Is that something that we can do, to make that initial decision and say, well, say 100 families are coming across, make it a decision? I don't think we can do it like that. Maybe we could, but to say, is there really a case for asylum? Are we really convinced, maybe upon initial screening, that somebody's there really, truly because they need asylum or not? And if they really and truly need to, they're brought in for a more in-depth screening. And their families are taken care of. We don't separate the kids from the families. I don't know, is that maybe that's something that we're doing? I'm not aware of it, although I think there is the initial screening, but just give me some response to that, Greg.
Senator, that is, since we're, Title 21 is our sole focus for the enforcement of the drug laws, that probably wouldn't be best for me to answer that.
Let me go to Commander White. I used to be a commander in the Navy.
So I'll have to defer to DHS colleagues on family separations. I can tell you that over the years, the reasons that unaccompanied children give when they're in our care for why did you come to the country are astonishingly the same over time. And the top three reasons always are because they feared violence in home country, because they lacked economic and educational opportunities in home country, and because they had family or parents or other family here in the United States they wanted to be reunified with. This seems to be a standard. But as regards family units, that's something that DHS colleagues would need to speak to.
Mr. Tubbs, any thoughts?
Absolutely. So I agree with your statement that we absolutely have to work with our foreign counterparts to work at the root causes of why people are leaving the country. I can also say that in my 24 years of working for Homeland Security and its previous agencies, that 9 of those years I spent foreign, stationed in the Dominican Republic of Mexico. And we do need to work with the root cause. We do need to work with our foreign counterparts, but we control a very small portion of that. Despite the help that we give them, we do control everything here in the United States. So while we work with our counterparts, I think we also need to focus very close on the laws that we have here and the capabilities that we have to secure our border and we as HSI to conduct our criminal investigations to dismantle those organizations.
All right, Mr. Howell.
Thank you, Senator. Agree we should work to have families stay together. Of course, the Flores Agreement, the longest being held is 20 days, so adjusting the Flores Agreement, allowing those family units to stay together through the entire process is the way to go.
The entire process, I think the backlog is like measured not in days, weeks, months, but actually maybe even years. And that gets to be, as you know, pretty expensive and frankly not very humane. But thank you. Mr. Garish.
Yes, but I'll also add, Senator Carper, is that when you detain, you're going to expedite a hearing. Ultimately, if the person is granted relief, they're released into the country. If they're not, they're immediately repatriated, because at the end of the day, you do need a consequence. Otherwise, you're just going to see that flow increase. During my oral testimony, I read off the claim from the Central American who communicated back to his associates is this is the quickest way, bring children, you're not going to be detained. So we've got to develop a process that we've done in the past. The Brazilians that were here in the 90s, 2000s, the way we stopped the problem is detain families together. You had your opportunity is to go before an asylum officer or immigration judge. If you were granted relief, you stayed. If you were not, you were immediately repatriated. We can always improve efficiencies in the government. This is an area for us to do it, but we also need to have a consequence.
Thank you. I talked with the chairman and the ranking member in the last couple of days about the idea of people within these 3 countries, the Northern Triangle, with asylum claims, being able to bring those asylum claims not in the U.S. at our border, not in Mexico, but within those 3 countries. And I'm going to ask you to respond for the record as to whether or not you think that's – Secretary Nielsen has been an advocate of doing that, as you probably know. But I'm going to ask you to respond for the record as to whether or not that's an idea that makes sense. Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Carper. Senator Sinema.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During this critical situation on our border, it's important to hear directly from the federal agencies who protect Arizona's border and our family and communities. So I appreciate all of the witnesses for coming and speak with us today. As I mentioned in our hearing last week, Arizona faces significant security, economic, and humanitarian challenges with these recent migration trends. Congress and the administration must focus on ideas and initiatives to help improve the situation. And I'm glad that the President heeded the calls from me, from border experts, and many other members of Congress to not close the southwest border. But last week, we heard from outside experts about their ideas to secure our ports, improve coordination with local NGOs, deploy critical technology between our ports, and improve workforce morale. And I look forward to hearing more about a frontline perspective on those ideas today. And as always, I'm committed to working in a bipartisan way to finding solutions that keep families and communities safe in Arizona and to treat migrants humanely and fairly. So my first question today is for Mr. Howe. I don't agree with CPB's decision to transfer officers away from Arizona ports of entry. Our ports have struggled with high vacancy rates in recent years, and that has led to the assignment of temporary duty officers. And I understand that CPB faces significant strain on its personnel, but our perspective is that this decision hurts trade, and we worry about it impacting security. So I want to know, what analysis did CPB conduct regarding removing these temporarily assigned officers from the ports of Arizona? Can you share that analysis with my office? And given that these ports were already understaffed, how does this decision not negatively impact security or flow of trade?
Thank you for the question. You know, the initial response that we provided our Border Patrol colleagues was to support them in this migration crisis. They were overwhelmed, are overwhelmed. So the decision was made to provide them the officers that they could use to put their agents back in their law enforcement activity. So 545 officers from the front line, the decision was made to address this crisis. We knew there would be impact. When Commissioner McAleenan had his press conference in El Paso, he mentioned that. So 545 frontline officers, 300 from Laredo, 194 from El Paso, and then 51 from San Diego. As you pointed out, we did not pull any from the Tucson field office, but the 75 TDYs that we had identified, we did not send them for assistance. So we know it's going to be impact. We see that every day. We see the backups in both the personal vehicles and the cargo. But this is a crisis that we're addressing with assistance to Border Patrol.
Last week, we heard about the need for additional surveillance and detection capacity between our ports of entry. We know that the largest drug busts and interdiction occur at our ports of entry, but there is still significant trafficking for narcotics and other threats between our ports of entry. So my question for Mr. Karisk is, what type of sensors do you think are most useful for agents in the general patrol duties? Do we need more cameras, more radars? Do we need more unarmed aircraft systems, or something that I haven't mentioned yet?
All technology has helped. CBP has made a tremendous investment in technology over the last few years, but we also need to have relocatable technology because traffic patterns will shift from one area to another. We saw it in Arizona, where I was previously assigned. It's having the technology that's going to help us with greater situational awareness. Right now in South Texas, what I see the problem is we don't have any technology that's foliage penetrating. So people get into the brush areas, whether it's the carrizo cane, whether it's the sugar cane, whether it's the other brush that's there. It makes it hard to detect. So it's a combination of different systems that we can actually apply onto the border is to act as that force multiplier for us. But ultimately, no fence, no piece of technology is going to make an arrest or an interdiction. That's going to be done by men and women who are out there. So it's important also is to be able to bring on additional personnel who can actually help us with that.
My next question is also for you, but I'd like to hear the thoughts of other witnesses if they have ideas as well. Last week when we were hearing from experts, they were talking about the importance of local offices forging close connections with the NGOs and local community leaders. As you know, we're facing a struggle in Arizona with the release of migrants and need to improve communication with our local NGOs. So my question is, in your experience, what do you find works best to help build those close relationships at the local level? And are there any tips that we could utilize when I'm able to go back to my state in the next 2 weeks to try and figure out a better solution for the crisis we're facing?
So I work closely with a lot of the NGOs out there in Arizona at the time, Juanita Molina and a number of other people who had the privilege of working with, but also even south of the border. During the time when they were speaking about a caravan coming up either to Arizona or to California at the time, it was sitting down with NGOs across the borders to figuring out exactly how many shelters they could open up, how they could help the ports of entry in organizing the number of people that actually showed up at the bridges. So that engagement does happen. We have very strong programs in the Border Patrol, Border community liaison agents who get out there and speak to NGOs. We work with them very closely. In South Texas, it's Sister Norma. Right now, she is helping us with the overflow in the people that we're releasing from Border Patrol custody to the respite centers. So it's working very closely with them is to try to figure out how they can help the federal government, but also expanding that into other areas.
I'd like to follow up with you after this hearing. I'll be back home in my state over the next 2 weeks during the spring period and intend to host a meeting to bring NGOs together with our local officers to help provide more close communication. As you know, we have had recent unexpected releases into the community that have been troublesome in Phoenix, Yuma, and in Tucson. If there are others on the panel who have thoughts on this question in particular, I'd appreciate it.
I would like to provide a response to your previous question, if I could.
Yes, that'd be great.
You know, I'm stationed on the border. I'm in Laredo, Texas, and specifically, if you look at what DHS does on the border, it's really a whole of DHS effort. And when we look at the transnational criminal organizations that are responsible for bringing aliens and narcotics, weapons across our border, we have our uniformed presence that that deter, that detect, that do the seizures. And I know that you asked what equipment that they might need and what personnel. But what I would ask is Homeland Security investigations, because we do a great job in deterring and detecting, but ultimately if we want to dismantle those transnational organizations and criminally prosecute them, criminally detain them, and criminally forfeit the illicit proceeds, that whenever you look at providing personnel and equipment to our uniformed partners that we work with every day, that you also look at Homeland Security investigations, because ultimately we need to dismantle those organizations and have them pay the ultimate price in prosecution and detention.
I appreciate that point. Thank you. My time's expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rosen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today. This weekend, while I was visiting my home state of Nevada, President Trump called the U.S. asylum process a scam. With respect to immigrants, including asylum seekers, the president said, "We can't take you anymore. Our country's full, so turn around." Our country is full. Turn around. As a granddaughter of Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe, I can't help but think about the time in the middle of the 20th century when the U.S. used security concerns as an excuse to turn away thousands of refugees fleeing Europe, or about the MS St. Louis ocean liner that in 1939 was made to turn around upon reaching American shores. I can't help to think about the many families today from El Salvador, Honduras, and elsewhere waiting in squalor outside our ports of entry because they are fleeing unimaginable violence and can find safety and freedom coming here to the United States. Yesterday, CNN reported that the president told agency personnel to close the ports of entry at the southern border. The president told border agents in Calexico, California, not to allow any migrants into the country. In my home state of Nevada, the UNLV Immigration Clinic has clients from Central America who are teenage girls recruited as gang girlfriends, as young as 12 and 13, meaning they face gang rape, possible death on a regular basis. Under U.S. law, are women and girls like this who are fleeing violence, they're entitled to protection, to at least apply for asylum. In fact, I know this to be true. A person who can prove she would be persecuted because of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, a particular social group, is entitled to asylum under U.S. law. And I assume, gentlemen, that you are aware that just yesterday a judge in California issued an order blocking the Trump administration from requiring asylum seekers to remain in Mexico. So, Mr. Karish and Mr. Howe, if the president were to instruct you and your agents to deny entry to people seeking asylum at the border, in your opinion, do you think that violates United States law?
I will start, Senator Rosen, by saying this, is if they cross between the ports of entry, they are violating U.S. immigration law. So they're going to be placed in arrest. But that still will not stop them from making an asylum or credible fear claim. But in effecting an entry into the country between the ports of entry, they are in violation of the law and they will be arrested.
Mr. Howe?
If they enter the United States across the boundary line at the port of entry and they claim asylum, we would be bound to hear that asylum claim.
So my follow-up question is, would you follow instructions like those from the president, even knowing, Mr. Howe, that they're going to violate U.S. law?
We know what the law is, and our attorneys are here to advise us. They work for Customs and Border Protection and DHS, so I will follow the guidance that we receive from our attorneys.
So knowing that we have this challenge, I guess I'll pose this in another way. Can you describe to me the concerns you have with implementing this administration's current policies?
Ma'am, we've taken an oath of office is to defend this country. Our officers every day go out there and perform a job. It doesn't stop them from addressing the asylum, the credible fear, the different things that they have. We are parents. We are grandparents. Our officers do our jobs as humanely as we possibly can. But understanding is that we do have laws in this country. People have to abide by those laws. Otherwise, we stop being a sovereign country. So it does not, we still feel the heartfelt issues of everyone that we encounter. But we still have to put them through the process. It will not stop them if they do have, in fact, a credible fear that they will have an opportunity.
So you're saying if someone presents themselves for asylum, you will take them in regardless of what the president has instructed you to do?
If they enter the United States between the ports of entry, they will be apprehended. That will not stop them from making an asylum claim.
Thank you. I'd like to follow up a little bit. Last year I toured a tent city in Tornillo, Texas, of course near El Paso, where unaccompanied children and separated children were held. I saw teenage children separated by gender, slept in barrack-like conditions, access to legal services limited, and phone calls to relatives or possible contacts were limited and monitored. So, Mr. Howe, I guess I'm going to ask you again, do you have knowledge that about the Tornillo facility, that it was owned or managed by a for-profit company?
I think I'll defer to the commander.
Yes, ma'am. So the Tornillo Temporary Influx Facility was operated by HHS, by the Office of Refugee Resettlement. Temporary Influx Facilities, that one was operated by a nonprofit grantee who also performed services for us operating state-licensed permanent shelters around the country. Temporary influx shelters, such as the one that's open now in Homestead, are not our first choice. Our first choice is to have state-licensed permanent shelter capacity. The fluctuations
You're saying they're
that
for-profit institutions that we're leasing. Are they for-profit institutions that we are leasing these services out to?
The Tornillo site was operated by a not-for-profit grantee.
Is in your estimation, or according to any knowledge that you have, currently are some of our detainees being held in for-profit institutions?
The Homestead facility, the children who are sheltered at Homestead, we are getting staffing services there by a federal contract, and the entity that won in the contracting process is a for-profit.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thanks, Senator Rosen. Before I start my questions, certainly in my quest, and I think this committee's quest to develop the information required to solve this problem, lay out the reality, one of the questions I've had is, what is asylum law? What is a valid asylum claim? What I'd like to do is quick read from one of the better explanations for this comes from Congressional Research Service paper written in January of this year. And let me just read it and I'll enter it into the record. To qualify for asylum, an applicant has the burden of proving past persecution or a well-founded fear of future persecution on account of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. The applicant must show that one of these protected grounds, quote, was or will be at least one central reason for persecuting the applicant. In the absence of past persecution, an applicant can show a well-founded fear by presenting evidence of a reasonable possibility of future persecution. Here's a key point. The applicant must also show persecution by the government or groups that the government is unable or unwilling to control, and for purposes of showing a well-founded fear, that applicant could not reasonably relocate within his country or avoid persecution. Again, we'll delve more into this, but I wanted to get that on the record. I'm very sympathetic with a lot of people talking about setting up asylum claims in the home country. I just find a disconnect. First of all, from my knowledge, asylum can only be claimed once you're in the asylum country, the safe haven. So if you're asking for protection in your home country, that's refugee status. And we have different laws and controls over a number of refugees. There are no controls in terms of the people we let in terms of asylum. Also, if you can claim safely asylum in your country and stay there, you're basically not qualifying for asylum because the government can't protect you enough to have you claim asylum. So I'm just trying to figure out, the disconnect, what's going to work, what's not going to work. But I think it's extremely important that we understand exactly what these asylum standards are. And I would argue this is probably the main reason why 85% of the claims are denied. And, you know, Commander White, you talked about in your testimony 3 reasons. Fleeing violence, there you go. There's a valid asylum claim, but economic opportunity is not, and family unification is not. As sympathetic as we all are for those individuals, it's not a valid asylum claim, and we've got a process now that, whether it's valid or not, we let you in the country, and those individuals are staying, which is just fueling the crisis, and gives you the numbers. We talked about the 9,500 up to 29,000 in over, you know, the 2018 period versus the last 3 months. So, again, this is a complex problem. The solution for the here and now problem is we have to change these laws. We have to reflect the asylum. Again, I agree with Dr. Saley from last week, where if we can rapidly adjudicate and make a determination, is this a valid asylum claim or not, and then humanely return people, just like we did with Texas Hold'em with Brazilians, that will accomplish our short-term goal of reducing that flow and hopefully converting this into a legal process. We were talking, I come from a position, certainly in Wisconsin, there's not one manufacturer that can find enough workers. From my standpoint, we need more legal immigration tied to work. So, again, I just appreciate, and I'll say again on the record, how the strong attendance of members of this committee, the excellent questions. I think we're getting to the reality of the situation. I think we're hopefully creating a desire to do something about this, certainly a recognition that the administration can't do it on their own. They're simply not capable. What executive actions they take are overruled by the court. So this is in our lap. This, you know, the ball is in our court. We have to fix this, and I'm really looking forward to dealing with all the members of the community, or of this committee, to start solving the problem. I would like to, you know, talk about the well-oiled machine, because I think it's really important that we recognize this isn't just a group of individuals deciding to wake up one morning and they make their way into. This is a very organized effort. And so, Mr. Karish, can you talk a little bit about your knowledge of that? And I'll go to Mr. Tubbs, because I think you've probably done a lot of investigation on this. Really talk about how well organized this is. You asked one of the pieces of information, I think it was the reporter, had done an estimation, thinking it's probably about $440 million worth of profits. That's just a back-of-the-envelope calculation, the fee times the number of people coming in here. And the drug cartels, or I guess it's a split-off business now. I mean, this is human traffickers, but it kind of flowed from the same process of realizing this is a higher profit in many cases and a lower risk form of trafficking than even drugs. But can you just talk about the well-organized effort here?
So very well organized, reaching back into places like Central America, and of course Mr. Tubbs will be able to talk that with a lot more certainty. But from the brush guides to the people who move individuals up to the border area, from the criminal organizations that are making the tax, we call it El Piso, down on the southwest border. Long gone are the days where you can simply decide that I'm going to cross in Juarez into El Paso. Now you're told where to cross, you're charged money, and refusal to pay money has consequences. So very, very orchestrated. I would say that the smuggling of people has even become more lucrative because it's an endless commodity. On the drug side, if it's seized, it's going to be destroyed. You've got to go produce more. They have the abilities to continuously bring more people, also recruiting younger smugglers, juveniles, because they know that the federal government can't prosecute them. So a lot of money going into this, but the cartels have the ability is to shut down bridges, to redivert caravans. That's the type of control that they have on the south end of the border at this time.
So you agree with testimony last week that the southern border is completely controlled, or the southwest border is completely controlled on the south side of the border, on the Mexican side, basically completely controlled.
Correct.
By the drug cartels. Mr. Cherundolo, you talked about the enormous profits in fentanyl. I think you said something like 5,000 is worth $1.5 million worth of profit. That kind of profit motive, if there's a demand, there's going to be a supply for it, correct?
That's correct, Senator.
But can't we almost say the exact same thing of human traffickers as well, where we have a system that is incentivizing and rewarding, that can be so easily exploited by a really well-organized effort. People that understand our laws know exactly how they're working, setting up a transportation system using buses and, other transportation. As long as this remains profitable, it's going to continue and probably grow, right? I mean, isn't every business venture's goal to grow and to become more profitable?
Absolutely. So, again, as we talked before, these human smuggling organizations are very organized, right? You have recruiters in the home country, you have transporters in the transit countries, you have the stash houses along the way, the individuals that get them across the border, plus their methods of money remittances, laundering their proceeds as well. And human smuggling has become almost, or coming to the point, as profitable as narcotics smuggling. And when we were specifically talking about human smuggling from Central America, but I can tell you specifically in Laredo, Texas, in 2017, we had an issue that Border Patrol intercepted approximately 200 Bangladeshis. And then in 18, almost 700. Well, we as HSI took on those numbers. We investigated that organization, ultimately arrested the leader of that organization in Monterrey, Mexico, the government of Mexico, and returned him and brought him to the U.S. to face prosecution. There's been 0 Bangladeshi since. But they were paying up to $27,000 per alien for Bangladeshis, $2,000 to $7,000 for Central Americans. It's a very profitable business, and they're coming here for a reason. They're coming here because specifically the Central Americans to work, and that's one of the reasons that we're increasing our worksite enforcement on the interior to take away.
I think one thing we had former CBP Chief Morgan on our panel yesterday, and you always hear 90% of drugs flow through the ports of entry. My question has always been, well, how do we know that? I mean, we don't even know really what's coming through between the ports of entry. And isn't it true when you have, again, over 100, groups of 100 this year, and that's a dramatic increase from prior years. Again, in a very well-organized effort, it just makes sense you use those 100 people as diversion. Over here, you overwhelm the system, requires all kinds of CBP officers to converge and take care of sometimes 6 children and that type of thing. Makes it pretty easy for somebody to sneak across with either drugs or a high value or a higher paying customer in terms of human trafficking, correct?
And Senator, I'll add to that. In January of this year, we had a 705-pound seizure of cocaine coming into the United States between the ports of entry. In close proximity to that, there was a group that was sent across with 170 individuals. So that is definitely a tactic and technique that the criminal organizations use, once again, is to tie up our resources, and then they exploit the gaps on the line.
Final point before I turn it over to Senator Portman, who has some more questions, is, and I think Commander White, you talked about the death of any child. The abuse of any child is a tragedy. But I do want to give Mr. Karish an opportunity to talk about, because I know in your testimony you talk about the thousands of lives that CBP has saved, because that is now your mission as well, and the medical resources were surged into the border. People are coming to the border having taken a very difficult, very dangerous journey. Some of them almost on life support. I just want to give you the opportunity to talk about how much time and attention CBP is putting into saving every person, the humane treatment that you're providing, and again, how this is an overwhelming task.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Senator. Every summer, especially, but even in the winter, from Brownsville, Texas, all the way to San Diego, Border Patrol agents are deployed into areas as to rescue people. I've seen agents in Del Rio jump into rivers to save children that their mothers had let go because they could not keep up with the currents. I've seen our agents rescue people off of mountaintops in Arizona. I've seen our people rescue people in South Texas. We do that on a regular basis. Our most important thing is the preservation of life. A great man once told me that simply entering the country illegal should not equate to a death sentence. So we provide those resources. We have units of agents. You've been out on the border, our Borstar units. But we also have EMTs. We deploy a lot of EMTs out there, which is important because during the summer, we'll see an increase in the number of rescues that our agents have to make out there. And it's a mission also that we take with great responsibility. But that's in addition to everything else we're doing. And what suffers is the fact is that you still have bad people and things that are coming through the border. 53% of the marijuana that's intercepted along the entire southwest border by Border Patrol is made in RGV. We've had increases in heroin. We've had increases in cocaine. So there are other commodities, illegal substances also that are coming through between the border. But it's just a heavy investment of all of the things that we have to do in securing our border, but also preserving life.
So does anybody want to just confirm what Mr. Karish talked about in terms of the efforts of CBP to try and save lives, or rebut it? Mr. Howell.
We're seeing the same thing at our ports of entry. We're seeing migrants that are claiming asylum that are medically in despair in most cases. We take them, as in my oral testimony, we take them to the hospital right away. So we go through great efforts to care for them to ensure that they're safe.
Anybody else want to speak to that? Senator Portman.
Thanks. And I again, want to start by thanking each of you for your service. This is such a rare opportunity to speak to a bunch of experts who are in the trenches every day dealing with these issues that I wanted to come back for a second round, and I appreciate the Chairman allowing me to do that. First, on the drug issue, I didn't have a chance to speak to this earlier because there are so many topics, but Mr. Charadola, you talked about the fact that fentanyl is now coming across the border, and we are having more seizures of fentanyl. Typically, as you know, it's been coming from China through the mail. My understanding in talking to Customs and Border Protection, that still is the preferred method for these traffickers, so still most of it's coming in through our own U.S. mail system because we don't have the tracking that the UPS and FedEx and others do. We're now putting that in place under the STOP Act. I'm disappointed it hasn't been done more quickly, but it's moving to the point where I think we'll have about 100% from China within the next several months. But do you think there is more fentanyl being shipped now into Mexico than coming across the border? And if so, why is that happening? Why wouldn't they simply do what they've been doing, which is send it to a P.O. box in the United States? Is it partly because of the STOP Act, which now will require the post office to have that data, where it's from, where it's going, what's in the package on all the packages, which it had not had until now? Or is there some other reason that they would want to ship it into Mexico? Again, my presumption is that it's not being produced in Mexico. There were 2 instances, I think, where we have found some production of it in the past, but my understanding is both those have been shut down. So what's going on? Can you give us the dynamics of that, and how can we be more effective in stopping it?
So, Senator, certainly the STOP Act is a welcome tool and has helped. The 2 primary methods of fentanyl coming into the United States, one are by parcel shipments into the United States, but again, coming across the southwest border, many seizures as a result of the investigations DEA is conducting and the investigations our counterparts are conducting. We're seeing an increase in the number of instances where large seizures of fentanyl are coming across the southwest border. The purity levels that we look at differ slightly. What we see coming from China tends to be a more pure form of fentanyl. But certainly everything from the investigations we're conducting indicates that Mexican cartel organizations are increasingly dealing in fentanyl, particularly in the form of making them into counterfeit drugs, into pills.
But you know that's been happening. But are you telling me today that we're now seeing evidence of manufacturing fentanyl, the synthetic opioid, in Mexico, or is this being manufactured still at chemical companies in China and then shipped into Mexico?
We are certainly looking at the production of fentanyl in Mexico and fearful that the transition from production of methamphetamine, which is very prevalent in Mexico, to fentanyl will occur, and that's
you haven't seen it yet, you haven't proved it yet, but you're concerned about it.
Certainly the 2 instances that you talked about are the instances we see, but the retableting and fentanyl
making into a tablet that looks like a prescription drug, an OxyContin or something.
But the precursor chemicals coming into Mexico too is what we specifically started a sensitive investigation unit with our Mexican counterparts that addresses the precursor chemical flow into Mexico for the production of fentanyl.
Well, there's something to keep an eye on because as we saw, it just overwhelmed us, and it's by far the #1 killer now among the opioids, and the opioids are #1 killer in the country. And in my home state of Ohio, we're getting devastated still by fentanyl. I will say that in a lot of areas of Ohio, we've made progress. We actually have the highest reduction of opioid deaths from overdoses of any state in the country in the last year. That isn't saying much because we started at such a high level. But what we're seeing instead now is crystal meth coming in from Mexico in a very pure form. I was told by a law enforcement official recently it's less expensive than marijuana by weight on the streets in Columbus, Ohio. That crystal meth is coming almost exclusively from Mexico. Is that correct?
That's correct. The production of methamphetamine in the United States is very limited to what we call mom and pop or shake and bake labs that are lower amounts. The larger seizures of methamphetamine we see coming into the United States as a result of our investigations are coming from labs that are producing the methamphetamine.
It's cheaper and more powerful than the stuff that used to be made in the basement or in the trailer, and that's what we're seeing in Ohio too. We're not seeing the environmental damage caused by that, but we're seeing a much higher grade, higher quality, more devastating drug, cheaper.
That's correct.
So what do we do about it? You know, in the appropriations bill, we put unprecedented amount of money into the screening technology to be able to look through a truck, for instance. We've also put in place the Interdict Act in addition to the STOP Act. We're trying to get more funding into personnel because the expertise that you guys need to have to be able to identify these products and safely deal with it. How's that going, and what should we be doing?
So certainly for all of us at the table, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think our resources from the personnel standpoint is a critical issue, particularly from a DEA standpoint. We continue to hire to fill vacancies, to have additional agents to do the investigations, but our relationships with our foreign counterparts are critical. The developing relationship, like I said, with the Sensitive Investigation Unit to identify chemicals flows into Mexico, particularly from China and from other countries throughout the world, are critical and key issues for us. But that partnership with our foreign counterparts is critical, and it's ever evolving. And with the changeover in the administration in Mexico, we're still working our way through how our relationships will develop, and continuing to strengthen those relationships is critical for our way forward.
Mr. Howell, Mr. Tubbs, thoughts on this? I mean, my sense is 90% of the heroin coming into Ohio comes across the border, southern border. Almost 100% of the crystal meth now coming in across the border. Increasingly more fentanyl, still mostly coming from the mail, but more of it now coming in. What would you do with this funding we've provided? What's the most effective way? And as the Chairman said, some of it is coming through the ports of entry, no question about it. The majority has been traditionally because it's been brought through with vehicles. But once that is closed down, my sense is they're now shifting more to places along the border where they can have access between the ports of entry. Is that accurate? Can you give us a rundown on what you're seeing?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Yes, the $564 million giving us that multi-energy drive-through system is going to increase our capability. We'll be able to stop the narcotics from coming in. Thank you for the STOP Act. We are seeing an improvement in that advanced data information coming from China and other countries. So I think as we work to fully implement that, and also the money you provided, the $45 million for our NII for our male facilities and more canines, that's all going to be paying off for.
Excellent. Mr. Tubbs?
And as I had said prior, as we look at the personnel and the resources that go to CBP for the interdiction, as those interdictions increase, our criminal investigations are going to increase, our response are going to increase, and we as HSI, ultimately what we're looking at is, along with working our counterparts in DEA, is identifying those transnational criminal organizations and working with our foreign counterparts and our SIUs and our TCIUs so that we can truly dismantle those organizations, and that is working with our
We talked earlier about push and pull factors, and there's no question we need to do more to keep the demand down here in this country because the prevention efforts are ultimately going to be most successful and getting people into treatment and longer-term recovery. And we're making progress on that, as indicated on opioids. But having this interdiction is important, too, because the cost of this drug on the streets will be higher. Some of it will be stopped, and because of supply and demand, some of it will be higher. And that's one of our issues right now is it's not only so powerful, it's so inexpensive relative to what it has been in the past. And so we thank you for what you're doing every day. You are saving lives by doing that. And finally, let me just say what you're doing on trafficking is absolutely critical, too. My sense is, and Mr. Tubbs, you see this, I know, coming across Laredo, more and more of these traffickers are trafficking people in addition to drugs. And it's a very lucrative business, just as you talked about earlier about how lucrative the drug business is. So keeping a a focus on that is also much appreciated by those of us here on this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Senator Portman, thank you for all the work you've done on the STOP Act car. I think we received good news that it sounds like an agreement that President Trump and President Xi had made is going to be implemented in terms of China cracking down on fentanyl. My question for both Mr. Cherundolo and Mr. Tubbs is, how soon are we going to be able to evaluate the effectiveness of that, whether they're actually going to follow through on that? And are we going to be able to notice it?
So, Senator, my understanding is that May 1st is when the class-wide scheduling goes into effect, and we will monitor the different analogs, the fentanyl analogs. Certainly, trafficking groups that profit from this are going to continue to produce it, but it has, in the instances so far when they've scheduled analogs, has been a positive thing for us, where we've seen less of those analogs. In your home state of Wisconsin, where they've class-wide scheduled fentanyl, we're very positive about that. And again, because of the number of people dying from fentanyl, we felt it was important for us to emergency schedule it. So I think, again, only time will tell once we get past May 1st on the reduction in that, but certainly there's still going to be a black market for organizations, transnational criminal organizations, both Chinese and Mexican, to traffic in fentanyl. But I think anything we can do, any tool that we can be given to strengthen, similar to the SOFA Act that was introduced last year by you, would be a helpful tool for law enforcement in prosecuting those, because it isn't a technicality that the analog gets switched by a slight chemical makeup and it makes it a legal substance rather than a controlled substance.
So unfortunately, we weren't able to get the SOFA Act across the finish line, even though every attorney general, I think it's the first time in history, wrote a letter asking us to do that. So your recommendation, please pursue that, and let's get the SOFA Act passed.
We will be glad to provide as much technical assistance as necessary.
Okay, I appreciate it. Mr. Tubbs, what's your sense of Chinese law enforcement in terms of their effectiveness of cracking down on fentanyl? Are we going to see a dent in that?
Well, I think we should be able to measure that in two ways. One is the number of intercepts that we have at our parcel transport hubs, and if we start seeing fentanyl being produced in Mexico, I think that'll be a sure sign for us, both of those.
Okay, with my remaining time here, what I'd like to do is just kind of close out the hearing, trying to lay out the current reality, because again, it's a growing crisis. Former Secretary of Homeland Security Jay Johnson was on MSNBC 2 Fridays ago and talked about how, when he came in the office, if apprehensions, and this is a paraphrase, were less than 1,000, it'd be, they could deal with that. Over 1,000 would be a really bad day. And yet we've seen apprehensions over 4,000 in recent weeks. So, Mr. Karish, I just really want to talk about what's happening now. I issued a press release saying that through no fault of CBP's, law enforcement at the border has been reduced to nothing more than a mere speed bump for unaccompanied children and people coming in family units on their path to long-term residency. I think that's a pretty accurate assessment, but just talk about functionally. We've heard reports that HHS is full. I mean, the House is full, so HHS cannot accept the flow. And so CBP now, even though they're not set up to do this, CBP is set up to turn, for example, unaccompanied children over to HHS, others to ICE. You're being forced to release people in the general population, correct? Can you just describe what's happening here?
Yeah. Of course, our facilities were not built for this. We don't have the resources. I mean, we're law enforcement officers who are dealing with a significant challenge with the family units. Something we don't want to do. In 1 week in RGV, we had 7,000 apprehensions in a week. Normally, our in-custody numbers for short-term housing, there's 3,300. In our short-term facilities that we have.
Which is still massive.
Yeah, but I had days actually where I was exceeding over 6,300 people in custody. We can't keep people. We could not keep people in those conditions. We were not built just to hold the families and the children.
So what's happening right now? What are you doing?
So what we had to do is issue a notice to appear, order of recognizance, which basically they were released with a promise to appear at a court date in the future. So once again, we're simply feeding a cycle that more than likely people will not show up for a hearing. This is not the way of doing business. If you look at the southwest border, over 364,000 apprehensions as of April 1st, over 100% increase. We're all seeing this.
Again, I want to get in the details. So, first of all, the notice to appear, back after DACA was, those memorandum were issued, that notice to appear was called by the Coyotes the permiso.
Yes.
Right? I mean, again, mismarketing. DACA applies to none of the, that's about 850,000 people past the DACA line there. Didn't apply to them, but is used. And so that notice to appear was called a permiso. Isn't that correct?
To them, yes, sir.
So now CBP issues the notice to appear, and then what happens? What do you do with these individuals that you give them a notice to appear, which the Coyotes call them their permiso, which by and large is their permission to enter the country and stay long-term. But what specifically do you do?
Yeah, we right now have worked with the NGOs. We're getting a lot of them to the respite centers in our areas to actually help.
NGOs like Catholic Charities?
Yep.
Okay,
Catholic
and then what do you do?
Is to help them out. Some of them are actually taken right to bus stations, already have relatives or sponsors in this country. We have to rely on the fact is that they're providing us with a genuine address. But we found in certain circumstances that after the fact we realized is that we actually had criminals in our custody that we didn't know about at the time. When we try to look for them, many times those were fictitious addresses. So some of them will be released in our communities, and we'll never see them again.
Within how many days are, let's say you got an adult male with a child, and you talked about, you found out, you finally got the adult to admit that that wasn't his one-year-old child, but how many days are they in your custody before you, CBP, you're not set up to do this, but are releasing these individuals to, and it was described last week, to the Greyhound bus station? You notify Catholic Charities. Catholic Charities comes over and picks up this group of people, and there are hundreds in a day, and then they have to deal with it, get people on the phone, and then return, give them a bus ticket. This is Catholic Charities providing that bus ticket to all points in America. I mean, that's what's happening, right?
Yes, sir.
So how many days do you have somebody in custody before you deliver them to that Greyhound bus station?
Well, right now, because of the overwhelming number of people that we have in custody, as soon as we can get them processed, we're releasing.
Which is how many hours or days?
It could be a matter of hours.
So you really don't have the capacity, and this is kind of getting to what Senator Langford was talking about, to determine, is that the father or is that a sex trafficker? Is that his daughter or is that his sexual traffic victim?
That's correct.
That's a pretty accurate assessment.
Yes.
This is, Commander White, this is not the way the system's supposed to work, correct?
I think it's safe to say that right now, all of the lead federal agencies in this process, CBP, ICE, and HHS ORR, are at or close to their operational capacity.
Would you say it's beyond their operation? I mean,
we're at 97%.
Is it
but
not
the system
true,
is over capacity.
that HHS is not accepting all the individuals that CBP would like to send your way?
That's actually not true, but let me clarify that. We're at 97% occupancy, and over the last week, we received, of the last 7 days, we received an average of 279 children a day, and we discharged 267. So over the last 7 days, referrals in have exceeded discharges out, and we're at 97%.
Again, you would only be getting unaccompanied children, though, at this point in time.
We only receive unaccompanied.
So the problem is with family units. And is it true then that ICE is beyond its capability of accepting the number of people in family units, pretty well forcing CBP into doing the releasing? Mr. Howell.
We're not releasing, from the port of entry. We will be waiting until ERO has the capacity to take, and oftentimes Border Patrol will assist us. Because some of our reports, like Hidalgo, have the capacity for 30 people. And once we get to that number, if we get overrun where aliens are crossing the boundary line, then the number could go up to 95, 100. So then Border Patrol assist us and take them into custody, and then if they meet the criteria, to have them released.
A couple of years ago, the stats I had, and these, everything's changing, so nothing's static, but approximately 20% of family units presenting themselves, coming in this country illegally apprehended, were headed by a male. The last stats I had, and they're old, about 40%. I thought in testimony you were saying about 50% now are headed by mail?
50% in the RGV sector, sir.
Okay, so again, what you're seeing is, and by the way, the kind of average number of people in a family unit is basically 2, correct?
On average, I mean, we tend to see different groups come into our custody, but it could be 1 or 2, yes.
Again, to me, that just indicates this is a shifting problem. You know, gone are the days where you're primarily dealing with a Mexican economic migrant. That was back in 2000 and prior to that. Now you're really dealing with unaccompanied children and people coming in family units, and they're not trying to avoid apprehension, correct? That they're turning themselves in.
Yes, sir.
When I was working with, down touring with the Border Patrol in the Rio Grande Valley, I remember one story of a larger group of families coming in and starting a campfire and then complaining to the CBP officers that it took them an hour to get to their location. Is that an unusual story?
No, because, I mean, first of all, anytime you have a large group, we don't have buses staged at every location, so it takes time. But I think our agents actually call it them apprehending us.
So, Commander White, real quick, just to confirm also some other stats I have. Unaccompanied children, historically about 70% have been male. 70, is that basically true?
Prior to 2014, they were about 2/3 male. The proportion that are girls has grown.
So what would you estimate now?
I could look up the exact number, but over recent years, girls have at times grown to be as much as 1/3, and among separated children, a larger proportion.
Okay, well, 1/3 is still leaving 2/3, 67%. So I'm, my stats had about 70%, but real close are male, and about 70% are 15 or older, correct? 15, 16, 17.
I'm sorry, I had the numbers with me. I just got to look them up. The great majority historically have been over 12. Over time, it is trending younger, and those trends come and go.
Okay. I'll give all the witnesses an opportunity to just, if there's something that you haven't been able, a point you haven't been able to make in response to questions, I'll let you do it right now, and we'll start with Mr. Cherundolo.
Chairman, the only thing I would point out in your circling back around to your question about China. So hopefully by June of this year, our law enforcement to law enforcement relationships, we continue to develop those. And in June of this year, we're hopeful to open another office in the Guangzhou province in China. So that relationship and building upon the class scheduling and hopefully being able to provide technical support for our class scheduling is something we continue to work forward on and with our counterparts throughout the world, not just in China.
Well, again, you've seen a great deal of interest on this committee, so we're going to want to be updated on hopefully progress. Again, I view this as a really good sign. It's exactly what China needs to do, and I'm glad they are, and we just have to monitor and verify this is going to be happening. Commander White.
Thank you, Senator. So, Senator Johnson, as you've noted, the current levels of migration, including for UACs, are much higher than historical norms. We just completed the biggest march in the history of the program in terms of number of children coming in. This not only speaks to our continual requirement to expand temporary and permanent capacity so that we have a bed for every child, it also speaks to the imperative of Congress and the administration working together to prevent future separations of children from family units. The program cannot support that.
Right, and again, I've stated my thoughts on that for the record. I think if you do take a look at that chart, you can see that the biggest problem right now, the growing problem, is people coming as family units. Mr. Tubbs.
Yes, sir. Again, I appreciate you having me here today. For myself as an HSI special agent, and specifically being one assigned to the border, I can attest to myself and OFO and Border Patrol, our agents work 24/7. I mean, they are at a tax point that we are on the border. They're very passionate about what they do. They're very professional about what they do, and we look forward to continued support from our legislators and our appropriators. So thank you.
Mr. Howell.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank you for all of the funding that you provided us to improve our NII capability. I think it's going to really prove to be very worthwhile, and I think thank you for your leadership and taking on the necessary legislation changes that we talked about today to fix the crisis.
Mr. Parrish.
Senator Johnson, thank you for raising awareness on a very important issue to this country. This is not a manufactured crisis. We're living it every day. My men and women are exhausted. They're frustrated in the fact is they're having to release people, but they also understand that this is the reality of what we're facing today. And this is only a portion. I worry about places like Venezuela in what we might see from immigration from those countries. So it is a very real issue that we're facing, and I appreciate the opportunity today.
Okay, again, I want to thank all 5 of you for your service to this nation. You shouldn't have to be dealing with this. The ball is squarely in Congress's court. We have to recognize this problem. First step in solving a problem is admit you have one. And we have a problem in the here and now that requires legislative action. So I want to work with each and every one of you. I want to work with the administration. I want to work across the aisle. This should be a nonpartisan issue. And we ought to be doing the root cause analysis. That's exactly what we're trying to do here, is lay out the reality, going through the problem-solving process, gathering that information, defining the problem properly, the problem we're trying to solve, defining what is a solvable problem. You know, what's an achievable goal? And from my standpoint, that achievable goal is reducing that flow by having a consequence. We've seen time and time again where there's a consequence to illegal activity, it gets reduced. And until we enact that consequence in an absolutely humane fashion, this is going to continue to explode. So, again, the ball's in our court. I thank you all for your service, for your testimony. Again, I hope all the committee members carefully read it, and I'm looking forward to working with them. The hearing record will remain open for 15 days until April 24th at 5 p.m. for the submission of statements and questions for the record. This hearing is adjourned.
Indeed.
Here's a look at our live coverage for Wednesday. The House returns at 9 a.m. Eastern to finish work on net neutrality legislation